Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Angela Young, and I am the co-founder of Art Hive Magazine, and I'm excited to welcome you all to Business Skills for the Modern Creator, presented by Broward Cultural Division. Today is session number 6 on Present Your Plan with Confidence. So, throughout this summer, we have studied the components of effective business plans, and today, we're going to revisit your goals and priorities to create your action plan. And then for the second part, you will have the chance to practice your elevator pitch and receive on-the-spot coaching directly from a public speaking expert. So far in our past sessions, we have covered topics on business basics, branding and marketing, protecting your rights. And if you've missed any of those, that's okay. You can check out the replay right on YouTube or Facebook. So, some important things to note before we get started. If you are joining us live today, use the chat box, interact with us and talk to us. Tell us about your creative medium, where you're coming from, and we want to know who you are. And also note that in between the session today, we will have a break so you can refill on your coffee. So, I want to get started. And I want to tell you a little bit about our first speaker who will be talking about revisiting your action plan. Let me tell you about him now. Rafael Cruz is the executive consultant for the Florida Small Business Development Center at Florida Atlantic University, serving Broward and Palm Beach counties. He is frequently invited to give keynote addresses and to be a part of distinguished panels on entrepreneurship, small business development, and economic development. Rafael has served on the decision panels for the Miami Herald's annual Business Plan Challenge, and he has appeared on television, radio, and in print to share information about successful entrepreneurial strategies to grow a profitable business. He works one-on-one with entrepreneurs and business owners on the critical aspects of running and growing a successful business. Some key areas of his expertise are international trade, government contracting, creative economy, strategic planning, financing, and access to capital. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on Rafael Cruz.
Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's doing well during these unprecedented times. Let's get started. Okay, we're coming to you from sunny Florida, of course, the greater Fort Lauderdale area of Broward County. All right, so if you didn't know where we're coming from, that's where we're coming from. All right, so good morning to everybody that's out there. All right, and we're going to be talking about your action plan. We had a session a couple of weeks back talking about some of the things that you should be thinking about in the plan, right? But now we're going to move into a couple of questions. Now, the way I'd like you to follow this, if you can, okay, is get out something to write on and something to write with. And as we go through this, I'll ask you a series of questions, and just jot down the first thing that comes to your mind. Right? Just jot it down. And when you're done, if you just jot down straight answers to these straight questions, right, what you're going to have is the basis of a draft of a plan, right? And then from there, you can take it from there, because generally, starting the plan is the hardest for most anyone, starting it, all right? So let's get our next slide, please. Okay, and we're going to start out with the genius comment here. Okay, everything should be made as simple as possible, but not simpler. Okay, we want it simple, but not simplistic. All right, that's very important. Simplicity is great for clarity. It's great if you can make something simple. That means that you've mastered it to the level that you can really communicate it in a pure and effective way, right? But we don't want simplistic, something that's not really well thought out, something that's not really well researched. Okay, next slide. And because we used Einstein, we have to have a picture of the universe there. Okay, now when you see this picture, that means we're going on to just a different thought, different thought pattern there, right? So that's your brain pause, your chapter break. Okay, next slide, please. Now, when we're talking about a plan, okay, these are the three things that have to hit, right? It has to be concise, okay? It has to be achievable. That's a check mark, that you can actually get it done, right? So, writing down things that are impossible to get done, because there's stretch goals, and then there's just unrealistic goals. Okay, and I wouldn't even call them goals, because if they're unrealistic, it's not really a goal. Okay, so some people subscribe to, let's take the craziest, biggest thing that we can do. That's great if you're going through brainstorming and things like that. But once you get down to an actual plan, you have to have stretch goals, but you want to make sure that they're achievable, right? And then the tape measure is about that, right? Measurable. How do you know when you've done it? How do you know when you've achieved it? How many did you have to get done? How many did you have to sell? How many did tickets did you sell? So what is it and how is it that we're measuring this? All right, being able to measure it lets you know that you've won, lets you know that you've completed something and you can check it off. And concise and clear communication in the writing and the presentation and whatever it is, concise and clear, right? All throughout, and the next presentation right after is you're gonna have a great experience with quote unquote your elevator speech, right? It's your story. It's what is the story? What's the narrative that's flowing through your plan, your action plan? So if I read it and you weren't there to explain it to me, okay, I would still get it. I'd still understand what you're trying to say. Next slide. All right, so I want you to answer this question. Why do you need a plan? Tick tock, tick tock. I'll give you a few seconds to write down your answer. Why do you need a plan? Why do you think you need a plan? Now, there are a lot of reasons to have a plan, okay, and I'll give you some of them now, right? Now, in a general business sense, a plan is used for some very specific things, okay? You develop a written plan because you're either trying to attract investment or you're trying to go after debt, all right? So you're going to get a loan or you're trying to attract investors. And they have to understand what you're going to do with the money and how you're going to grow the money. So those are key business reasons to have a plan. But let's say you're not seeking investors or you're not seeking a loan, right? Why do you need a plan? Why do we suggest you have a plan? Well, the plan keeps you and your team honest, and it gives everybody a reason, okay, to stay on page. Next slide. Plan is like a compass, right? It keeps everybody pointing in the right direction. When we don't have a plan, what happens is we generally will start scattering, right? And we'll go chasing shiny objects as they appear in front of us, and we'll start out with a great idea and a great path, and then a little bit along the way, something else will pop up and it'll look like an opportunity, and we'll go chasing that, we'll do it again and again and again, and realize we haven't got anywhere. Now, I equate this to, because we're talking to creative folks, maybe we can use this example, right? You study music for 10, 15 years so that you can be good at jazz improvisation. You would think improvisation, you could just get up and do it. Well, no. Anybody that knows a little bit about music and appreciates jazz understands there's a clear structure, right? There's timing, there's elements. You have to play in the right key. You have to play the right scale in that key, so on and so forth. So to do and be good at jazz improvisation, right, means that you have to study certain things. So you're following a plan, even though it's not planned out in the moment. right? So what allows that improvisation is that you studied that plan so tightly and you studied that structure so tightly and you know it so well that you can artistically and creatively move within it. Next slide. Now here's the first step, okay, that's non-philosophical. This is reality now. What is your idea? And you see that it's a single idea. Many of us have multiple ideas, okay? We're creative folks, we're thinking about many things, right? Keep a little book and write down all of your ideas, but you can only work on one of them at a time effectively. So what I'd like you to do is choose one of your ideas, the next show, okay, the next art exhibit, right? The next theater production, whatever it is, okay, and that's your idea for this thought process today. Okay, so you write that down. What's my idea? Here's my idea. We're going to put on a show. We're going to have an art exhibition. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. And if we can move the cursor from the slide there, that'd be great. Right now, what we want to do is we want to say, now that we have the idea, in general, we want to ask ourselves, how much is it going to cost to execute, to get this done? How much will it cost to get this done? There's a lot of different ways you can approach that. We're going to talk about the financial side in just a little bit, but I want you to think about now, what is the real cost of this? A big area that folks forget to take into account when they consider cost is their own time. If you were a lawyer or you were a surgeon, you'd immediately think how much it costs you to get something done. But often, folks that are doing things like the way we're doing it, they'll think about all the outside costs, but they won't put a cost in for their time and their effort. Okay? So I always say, make sure that you lump in there, okay, an hourly cost for yourself, and make sure it's a reasonable market-based hourly cost, not something that paying yourself $1 an hour. That's not a market-based cost. All right? If you're an artist and you have 20 years experience and you studied and you have your degree and everything like that, okay, we're talking, $50 an hour. We're not talking $1 an hour. So make sure you put that in and account for the time that you've involved yourself. Because that, if I were hiring you, that's what I'd have to pay you. So when we talk about cost, we're talking about the total cost of everybody involved. Even if those people are doing pro bono or free work for you, okay, it does cost them something. It costs them their time. So we want to respect that. And then as you go and you get more advanced, you will have to actually pay those costs, right, going forward. So cost is a big element of it. And it's also a limiting factor. If you have a great idea, but it costs $14 million to get it done, well, that's a limiting factor, all right? Can we get it done for a lot less than that becomes an issue, all right? So cost is a factor. Next slide, please. Now, this is a key question because some of you may be thinking, well, I don't need investors. There's a lot of ways that you want people to invest in your idea. Okay? You want them to be on board. You want them to believe in it. Okay? If you're a visual artist, you want them to come to the show and see the work. Okay? If you're doing a theater production, you want them to buy a ticket, right? So there's a lot of ways that people invest, and especially now during unprecedented times that we're having during this pandemic, okay, you have to ask yourself, why should anyone invest in what I am producing, what I am creating? Why should they invest their time? Why should they invest their passion? Why should they invest their money? Should they buy a ticket? Should they buy a piece of my work? Should they buy my album? Right? Those are all investments. Those are various types of investments. And these are the things that now at this level you should be thinking about, okay, when you're really thinking about seriously turning your creative practice, your creative career, all right, into a serious creative profession, right? Profession being you're professional and you're getting paid for it, okay? There are many people listening now that have years of experience and produce wonderful art, but have been trying to just cross that bridge over to that level where, you know what, I want to be a full professional artist. This is what I want to do full time. I want to do other things. I don't want to have to do other things. This is what I want to do full time. So these are hard questions that we think about, all right? Who should be investing and why should they be investing? What is the value to them? all throughout this series here, one of the underlying lessons that you should be having is that it's not about me. It's not about us. It's about them. It's about the audience. It's about the patron. It's about our customer. How do we improve their lives? How do we uplift them? How do we make them feel better? So people that are sitting at home right now, alone and scared, how does our art, okay, reveal something amazing about what's happening now that they didn't see, that they didn't catch? And only through our creativity can we bring that to them. So this is what we want people to invest in. And you have to be clear about why they should invest. Next slide. Now, who benefits? Now, if you do have investors, okay, they're going to be looking for a return on their investment, right? Return on investment of, 20%, 25%, however much that they're going to be looking for return. Okay, that's what all investors are looking for, right? But who benefits? You're putting on a theater production, right? The audience benefits. Well, how do they benefit? How do you want them to feel during and after the show? Let's change their life. What do we want them to think about? What do we want them to learn? So not only who benefits, but how they benefit. What are the clear benefits to the people that are receiving your creativity, receiving the gift of your creativity? This is critical to think about, because if you're not clear about who should invest, why it should invest, you see all these folks that you're dealing with. If you're not clear about who they are and why what you're doing is good for them, then it's very, very hard for you to convince later, all right, to get those investors and to get those loans and to get those things, and to be clear about your plan, because you can't communicate to people that you don't understand. So you have to understand who is it that benefits and how they benefit from what you're doing. Next slide. Now, for those of you out there who really, really just need to see an outline, here it is for you, okay? I know you're out there. You said, oh, but Rafael, I need an outline. I need an outline. Well, here's your outline, right? Generally, a business plan, there's a very simple, you can find this anywhere online. Just get on Google and put in business plan outline, and something like this will pop up, okay? But very much like I was talking about jazz improvisation, if you're playing in the wrong key and you're playing the wrong scale of that key, right, it doesn't matter that you understand the outline. You're not playing well, right? So here, it's less important for you to think about this outline now. It's more important for you to jot down the answers to the questions I'm asking you, and then you go back, and you can always take it and stick it in the executive summary if that's part of it, or stick it in market analysis or in the financial information. The point is, the outline and the actual writing of a business plan or an action plan comes after you get the ideas down on paper that we're talking about. Because without those fundamental ideas and those fundamental issues, right, it doesn't matter if you're following a structure or an outline. I've read tons of business plans that followed beautiful outlines and had wonderful pictures, and they were terrible plans because people didn't think through them properly. So it's much more important to have a good plan, okay? And people will forgive the fact that your executive summary, you didn't have one, okay? So here's an outline for you. You can get outlines all over the internet, but it's not the most important thing. So don't get wrapped up into this now with the outline. Okay, there you go. Next slide, please. All right, there's our little universe. You can take a breath. And remember, during these incredible times, there's a lot of things that are bigger than us. So pull back every once in a while and think about the big things. Okay, next slide. All right, we want to talk about financials here, okay? Again, little thing there. Not everything that counts can be counted. And not everything that can be counted counts. That's important, especially when you're talking about what we're talking about, right? What we're talking about is structuring an action plan, a business plan around a creative idea. What sometimes is very, very difficult to quantify, to turn into a measurable, all right? A creative idea or the feeling we want to get across. But that's why we go through this exercise. Right? That's why we go through this exercise, because you want to make sure that those things, okay, that you want counted are actually counted. So again, how do we make people feel? So if someone's standing in front of a piece of our art, What is the experience? What's the experience? What's the feelings? Okay, how is it that we want them to change because they've engaged with what we've created? Right? These are critical ideas that you have to be able to articulate, okay, so that you avoid doing what a lot of folks do. Many of you out there have experience writing grant proposals, or you've read grant proposals. You've been a judge and you've read them and you've helped out. You've done a lot of various different things, talking about grant proposals and looking at grant proposals. And you have these artist statements, or you have these other statements that begin the grant proposal. And they're very flowery and they're very nice. And I'm not criticizing anybody, but often it's a lot of flowery words that don't say much. And after you read a couple of them, one grant proposal statement sounds the same as the next and the next and the next and the next. When you look at the artwork, okay, or you look at the production, it's very unique, it's very creative. But when it comes to communicating it, it's not. They've either copied something that was said before, or they followed some structure that they saw, all right, or they read a book and pulled it from there, okay, but it's not their own ideas, it's not their own words, it's not authentic. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, that's not necessarily financials, but that's critical to the success of your plan. All right, next slide. Now, when we talk about financials, okay, for those of you that are starting out, right, those of you that are just starting out, just getting out of school, or you've been doing art, let's say as a hobby or something that's been passionate to you, weekends, evenings, and you've been producing art stuff, and you really want to get into this, well, the first group of financials that we look at is the startup cost. Right? How much is the start to just turn that key and get the door open? Okay. And on the right-hand side here, what you see is a couple of the areas, right? The personnel, legal and professional fees. Whenever you're dealing in businesses, there's three advisors that you're going to need eventually, right? And you're going to need someone that helps you organize and talk about your taxes and your financials. That's a CPA, right? Your certified public accountant. You're going to need lawyer. You want to get a lawyer that's familiar with your type of industry. So if you're in the music business, you want a lawyer that's familiar with music business. And if you're in visual arts, so on and so forth, theater, so on and so forth. You want to make sure your legal advisors know your industry. Okay? And then you're going to need to know, somebody has to do with financing. So usually a banker or some equity people, investor type folks, because again, these are the folks where when you start to grow, okay, your projects, when you start to grow your business, guess what? You need capital injection, you need a loan. You know these people. You get to know them now before you need them, not the day before you need them. All right? You don't start a relationship the day before you need it. You start it now. Okay? Occupancy, if you're gonna be opening a place, what are the license and permits that you need? These are all startup costs, because you got to get these things before you can even start. What's the equipment that you might need? All right? Any build out, insurance. What are the supplies and inventory that you need just to get started? What are utility costs to turn them on? And any other thing that you might. Right? So you want the questions you're asking is, how much do I need to start this up? And again, things like about is not included in these. Numbers are numbers. So when we say how much do you need, it should be a number. The number 10 is a number, not about 10, not about $100, not about $1,000. It's $1,000 or $1,001. We want to be very, very precise here. And again, precision, clarity. Find out how much it's going to cost you. Get the answer and put that clearly in here. Okay? And just make a list of these. Doesn't have to be any particular fancy way. You can get the structure afterwards. You can put an Excel spreadsheet, whatever you want to do. But right now, you just need a running list of how much it's going to cost you to get these things done. What am I going to use it for? How will I use this money? If I have $10,000, how much am I spending on occupancy and licensing? Because if license fees are a lot more than I thought they were going to be, that impacts, okay, my budget, right? And of course, the critical question is, where will the money come from? Where am I getting it from? Okay? In general business sense, when you're starting a business, a good amount of money comes from yourself and friends and family who believe in you. Again, invest, believe in you, right? And maybe put some towards your project. Okay? But do we need a loan? Do we need investors to get this thing off the ground? Right? So these are the hard questions that we're asking ourselves now, because now we're doing this for real, right? This is not just a thought process. This is actually getting out there and doing it. And I'd like you to understand something. You know, if we can go back to the Renaissance, and if you read books about the Renaissance, you'll understand that the Renaissance artists that you know and love, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and stuff, these folks understood contracts in and out. They understand the financing of what they were doing. You know, when Michelangelo was asked to paint the Sistine Chapel, he had to take into account the cost of the scaffolding, the cost of the paint. How much does it take to hire all the fresco artists that I need to get this done? He didn't do it by himself, right? So in that sense, Michelangelo was acting more like a construction site manager and a business manager than he was an artist, right? And we forget that often nowadays. We've separated ourselves from that business side of, you know, back in the days when they were putting on, you know, Mozart was putting on something, or you have folks putting on an opera. Well, there's costs associated with that. Okay, the costumes, right? The stage, right? The backdrops and all the things that go into putting on a major production. Well, these things cost money, and you have to sell enough tickets and have enough shows to cover the cost. So this has always been a part of the creative process. It's always been there. And now people acting like they're rediscovering it. No, most successful artists can tell you that they've had to learn this, right? We're not trying to turn you into an accountant, because that wouldn't work. The same way it wouldn't work to turn an accountant into a jazz musician, unless they were born with that, right? So no, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about, though, is you getting familiar enough that you can manage your own professional career properly. And then you surround yourself with the advisors that give you the good advice so you can make the good decisions that you need to make, okay, on the financial, on the business side. Next slide, please. Now, there's two separate worlds here in the finance, right? There's a startup cost, what it takes just to open the door. And that you saw things like permits and things like that. That comes before, right? Operating is every dollar you spend to keep it going. Every dollar you spend to just make it keep going, keep the doors open. Okay, so whether that doors are virtual doors, right? You have a virtual business, or it's an actual brick and mortar place where you have a studio, you have a theater that you've opened, and you just need to, you know, so again, here are a couple of things that you want to go over, right? You need insurance. What's the rent? Okay, if you have a location, rent becomes a very, very big issue, a very big issue. Now, you want to make sure you have a good lawyer that goes over any rental agreements, any leases, any things like that, to make sure that it's not only in the landlord's best interest, but it's in your best interest also, right? And because rent can be a big expense, a big operating expense for you, all right, that people don't really take seriously enough. They get excited about a location. Oh, wow, this is a perfect location. Is it really? Is it really the perfect location? Because if it's costing you way too much and you can't do enough just to pay the rent, then it really isn't a perfect location. If what you're producing is that creative and it's that meaningful, people will go a half a mile down the road to see it. And if the rent is better half a mile down the road for you, that's where you should be, right? So you don't fall in love with the location and things like that, and you make this a business decision, right? So rent is a big area. The loan payments, if you took out a loan, you don't want to take out a loan that the payments are so much that they drown you, right? How much is it going to cost to advertise this and promote it? Okay? I don't want you thinking about, oh, I'm going to do everything free online. I'm going to do everything free, you know, online and with social media. Don't think that way, right? Because that's not one of the best practices. Can you use social media? Yes, right? But it's not free. At minimum, it takes your time. Or you hire somebody that's a professional, all right, to get it done for you, okay? For instance, the folks here that we're partnering with, Art Hive, you know, they do phenomenal work. I mean, if you had a presentation and you wanted to do a presentation online, you'd partner with Art Hive, and they make sure that you're doing it properly, that you're doing it in such a way that it's actually effective, right? So, but that's going to cost you something, okay? So let's be realistic about this. Advertising, promotions, and things like that are going to cost you something to get them done properly, All right, if you want to get them done and not so well, okay. You go on, you just throw up your YouTube channel and go for it. But that's not my suggestion. All right, that's not what I've seen over time. Right? Legal accounting, we went over that. Inventory supplies, we went over that. Salaries. A lot of times folks will start business, start operating, and they don't pay themselves. Well, why are you working for free? Why do you have anybody working for free? This is a business, it's professional. We have to take into account salaries. And we have to take that into account because from the beginning, okay, if you're not listing the true operating expenses, you'll get comfortable just bringing enough to cover your fake expenses without salaries and things like that. And then what will happen is you'll never be able to turn it into a real business. And a real business pays salaries. So and that's what we want to do. If you have people doing things for you, you want to pay them and you want to pay yourself. Right? Now, I want to stop here for a minute because you see the question of why are you working for free? We see this traditionally, okay, with our creative clients, with our artists. Right? I'm not sure what it is, and I'm going to talk to you from the heart here just for a minute. I'm not sure what it is that so many of you undervalue yourselves. Right? So if somebody, if you have you're a dancer, and a month from now you have a show, right? The question is, when do you start practicing for that show? When do you start practicing the dance for that show? All right? I want you to think about that for a minute. So if any of you are dancers out there and you have a show in a month from now, when do you start practicing for the show? I'll let you think about it. Whatever answer you had, I can guarantee was wrong. Because when you started practicing was when you were 5. When you were 5 years old, okay, somebody took you to a dance studio or you saw a dancer on TV and you fell in love and you didn't know why. And you were born a dancer. And you've been working at it since you were 5. So you've been practicing for that show that's going to happen next month your whole life. How much does that cost? What is the value of that? And often we'll have that same dancer question his or her ability and undervalue themselves. No, if you've put in 20, 30, 10, 15 years of hard work, you have the blisters to prove it, all right? And a closet full of dance shoes that you've worn through, well, guess what? That means something. Okay, that's an investment of time and effort, right? And it should be reflected in the reality of your business plan. So that's challenging for a lot of creative folks, but it's necessary. And salary is one of the ways you can demonstrate it to yourself, right? You must give yourself a market salary and put it in there. And you need help with that. Trust me, a lot of people that can help you, okay? And your CPA is one of them. Utility costs. That's another area you have to be careful of. Right? And you include utility, we're talking about Wi-Fi also, things to get stuff done, because what the pandemic has shown us is that being adept at technology and staying on top of things like, being able to do these type of things, right? This is new for a lot of people. Guess what? It's been around for a long time though. So it shouldn't be new. And creative people should always be on the cutting edge of things, just to get familiarized with it. Taxes, you want to pay your taxes, just pay them. And remember, the reason you're paying taxes is because you're successful. You're making money, right? Now you get a good CPA and they help you save on taxes, so you don't have to pay taxes you shouldn't pay. But paying taxes means that you're making money, so that's a good thing. And then always take into account also repair and maintenance. Right? Repair and maintenance is something that we forget about. So if you have machinery or you need, you have machinery or you have tools and equipment that you use to produce what you produce, you have to have a repair and maintenance schedule to make sure that those things don't break down at a critical time. And you have to be sure how much it costs you on an annual basis or monthly basis to keep those things running. All right, next slide. Okay, now this is when we get into, in an action plan or a business plan, are you going to do some projections, right? You want to show, hey, this is how much money we intend to make. This is how much it costs us, our expenses. So revenues are what comes in, right? Revenue. Right, so what comes in, sales, okay? And in this case, we're looking at basically a t-shirt business, right? It's a very small business. They sold $14,000 worth of t-shirts. You see it right there, the top line, shirt sales, $14,000. We've kept this very simple. So total revenue is $14,000. Well, what are our expenses? How much did it cost us to get this done? Well, the shirts cost us $6,500, right? We got some ink, okay? Remember, some supplies, right? $2,000. Look, we spent some money on marketing, okay? And wages, there goes those salaries, okay? So see how they're in there, right? And then the amount that it costs us to ship. So our total expenses are $16,200. Why is that number red? Well, we have a net profit? No, we have a net loss. We lost some money here. So something's happening here. I want you to think about your finances not as math. Finances are not math. The hardest math we use in business is percentages. So don't let anybody fool you and pretend that business math is hard. No, it's what's in front of you here. Simple calculator, or if you can run this through your head, you add it up and you say, wait a minute, I've lost $2,200. I'm doing something, not that you're doing it wrong. We need to start looking at it. Are the costs of our shirts too high? Okay. Are our wages too high? Do we have too many people? We don't need them. Did we not sell enough shirts? So what the financials are really is a language. And it's a language that's telling you something about the business. Now, an income statement, or in the past it's called a profit and loss statement, okay, is that report that you get on a monthly, you get a weekly, a monthly, usually a monthly or quarterly basis, and it is a picture in time of what your business is doing at that time. It's a picture. You're taking a picture, boom, I stopped something in midair, right? Now, if right after this you sell 1,000 more shirts, these numbers change. Okay? Now, maybe at the amount of shirts that you've sold, the cost of the shirts are higher, so this is why you lost money. But if you would have sold double the amount of shirts, the cost of your shirts would have shrank down by 50%, so you'd have made a $2,200 profit instead of a loss, right? So this is why it's important to stay on top of the numbers, because the numbers help you manage the business. The numbers are talking to you. The numbers are telling you, okay, what's happening. In this case here, your cost of shirts, if you knew that from the beginning, your cost of shirts should only go up for every shirt that you sell, because it's related. That would be called a variable expense. It goes up as sales go up, as revenues go up. A fixed expense is going to be your rent. That's something on here, you don't have that because we kept this simple. But a fixed expense would be rent. It's the same no matter what you sell. Okay? So there's those differences between costs. Your variable, they go up with your sales and down with your sales, and your fixed that stay the same no matter what. Next slide. Now this is fun. Okay? So look at that for a second, and you see it has assets, liabilities, and equity. This is the balance sheet. You've heard of it. Right? And the balance sheet tells you in its name what it should do. Balance. Right? Assets are things that you have or you own. Things that you have or you own, that the business has or owns. Liability is what you owe. What you owe on the things that you have or you own. And the equity is the value or the difference between those two, what's left over. Right? Now that's very simplistic, but that's just an easy way to understand it. So easiest thing is, you have cash, we have cash in the bank, we own that, right? Accounts receivable, that's what people owe us. Inventory, you have inventory there, it's valued at something, okay? And on the liability side, accounts payable, this is what we owe to somebody. So we brought in some inventory, I bought wood to make frames, right? But I haven't paid for them yet. So I owe somebody money. So the inventory, my wood for my frames, valued at $1,000, but I owe $900. Well, I don't really own $1,000, okay, because I owe $900, right? So that's how that works, okay? Now don't get wrapped up in each of these things, accrued expenses and floor plan notes and payables and things. Your accountant can explain these, or you can look these up online and see what they mean. That's not the important thing here. The important thing is to understand that your balance sheet must balance, right? So let's go to next slide. Okay, so you see, this is how you can see it a little easier here, right? If you take a good look at this, okay, you see that on the asset side, you have cash, $9,500. We have some equipment, $5,000. Inventory, $15,000. Accounts receivable at $20,000. So we add those up and we have the total assets, the things that we own. But on the other side, it's saying we owe accounts payable. We have to pay somebody, our suppliers, 21,750. You got credit card balance, 5,250. Right, long-term debt, we don't have that. And our total liabilities are 27,000. That leaves us with the difference between those two, which is 22.5, right? And that's what the owner's equity is. Now, if we add up that owner's equity and you add up the total liabilities, the 27,000 with the 22,500, you'll see that that equals 49,500. Balance. There should be balance. Okay, and that's all that's saying. So this is a very simple, this could reflect any of your businesses. Numbers might be bigger, numbers might be smaller, but this is a very, very simple balance sheet. Again, it's a point in time so that you can see, hey, what is the value of this business? What do we, how much do we owe? Are we over leveraged? Over leveraged means do we owe too much on what we own, right? Because bankers and investors look at that. That's why the balance sheet becomes important, all right? That's why these things are important. Because again, in your plan, this demonstrates what you're going to do with the money and how the money is flowing through. Okay? That's why it's important. Next slide. Now, if you didn't get those, this is even easier because now this is a balance sheet basically on an individual, right? It's a balance sheet on an individual. So what you have here is on the asset side, you have a condo, okay? And I'm not sure where this is because you can't get a condo for $140,000 anywhere anymore. But it's an old example. I use it because it's simple, right? But you have a condo, own it, you have $140,000. But if you look right across, it says mortgage. I owe $127,500, right? So I can't count all that value as I own all of it. I owe $127,500, right? And my car is $16,000, but I have a car note, right? A car loan. So you see how it balances out? I have the asset on one side of what I owe. I have my computer, okay, but I still owe $800. $800 I use a computer to buy the credit card to buy the computer, okay. Then I have my bike is worth $800, and then my smartphone is worth $600. Well, the minute you buy it, right, it goes down in value. But same thing with the car. However, that's the amount that you paid. And add that all up, and look, you're worth $158,600. But you owe $153,350. Those are your liabilities on what you own. You owe and own. Okay. The difference would be your equity. Now, interestingly, if some of you do this, you might find that your actual equity, what you're worth, right? Okay. It's called a net worth. What you're worth after it is a negative number. That happens often, so don't be surprised. Okay, don't go into shock. All right, and don't get scared. That happens often, but you want to get that into a positive number, okay? Because while that number is a positive number, it makes it easier for you to access credit, okay, to get things like loans. So this should be an easier and a quick and simple way for you to understand, okay, your assets, your liability, and there we go. All right, next slide. Take a breather. All right, now that's our numbers. Okay, for today, those are the financials. It's early in the morning here in sunny Florida, but we had to get through some of those numbers. They're very important. Okay, they're critical. All right, I'm going to make a suggestion to you. Okay, and I've done this for many, many, many years. Right, I've done this for many years. For some reason, many creative folks are hesitant to dive into the numbers. So what I do is I tell them start with the numbers. Even though I'm asking you to write down the answers to those questions that we asked before, and I asked you a couple other questions, write them down, jot down some numbers too. Dive into the numbers portion of it first so you get over the fear and you'll realize, wait a minute, this is not that hard. I can add, and if I can't, I know somebody that can. Just get the help, okay? But you can find prices on stuff. So, get in there and have fun with the numbers. Remember that the numbers are not magical. They're communicating to you. And I find that people that study or understand math, or that really have studied color theory and things like this, have an innate understanding of numbers already. Anybody that's done a theater production understands pricing and numbers. They just don't talk about it the way accountants talk about it. So don't get afraid of the vocabulary. You already have an innate understanding. Music is very, very balanced. It's very, very, there's numbers all, 8 notes and, going up an octave and a sharp and a flat. And I mean, a seventh flat, sharp, whatever it is. I mean, people that do music understand numbers in a way that very few other people understand numbers, right? And to make it sound like music, you have to stay within that number discipline, that number structure. So you have this already is what I'm telling you. You have this, okay? Just let it flow through you. Don't be scared of it. Don't let the fact that you may or may not have been the best student in your math class prevent you, okay, from taking yourself to the next level. And get help if you need the help. There's a lot of help out there, So just go get the help. Ask for the help, right? It's out there and it's easy. So as you are a genius in your area of creativity, there's a genius with numbers. Well, have them help you. Let them do their thing, okay? And you do your thing, right? And give them a painting or let them come to the first opening of your show, right? So next slide. Now, I know this is challenging for some creative folks to think about that they're in competition with anybody. Well, I'm not in competition with anybody. I create something and it's out there and I put it out and I share it. We are in competition because if we're looking for people to pay us, the competition is competition for those dollars, right? Now, I don't want you to think about this in a mercenary way. We're not talking about that. But there's 2 ways to approach your competition. You can go head on like a battle. We don't want that type of competition. That's not what we're talking about. What I want you to think about your competition is who are the best people working in your area or your medium? Okay, next slide. And what are their strengths? Okay, what are they doing that I can learn from? What techniques, right? She's lifting that heavy, heavy barbell over her head. She's using a lot of years of technique, a lot of practice there. Well, guess what? I don't want to reinvent the wheel. If I'm out there and I'm doing this type of work and I want to compete at this level that she's competing at, well, guess what? Maybe I want her coaching me. Maybe I want to be an apprentice first before I get out there. How have I learned this? Okay, am I paying the amount of respect to the history, all right, the depth and the breadth of my art form? So when we talk about analyzing the competition, we're talking about everything that came before you. How do you see yourself in the trajectory of your art form? How are you adding to the story of theater? How are you adding to the story of visual arts? How are you adding to the story of creative writing, okay, of fiction, of making documentaries, filmmaking, whatever your discipline is? How are you taking it to that next level? What are you doing so that 100 years from now, we're studying you? We know who you were. So when I say analyze the competition, what we're talking about is being bold enough, being brave enough, all right, for you to find out who are the best in your area and then at least meet them where they are. Respect them enough to produce and put out work that challenges them to be more creative. And then their work challenges you to be more creative. If you study art history, you'll find, okay, and I like to use, the Impressionists as an example there. Many of them knew each other. They drank coffee with each other. They spoke about philosophy and politics, and they challenged each other. They went to each other's shows. And why they do that? Because not only were like-minded, but they would take each other to a new level. So you should have a community of artists around you, and if you don't, create one. Create a community of competitors and keep yourselves on edge, keep yourself sharp, right? Keep yourself learning how to lift more and more and more, taking it to that next level. Okay, next slide. Then what we want to see is the weaknesses. Okay? Not only our strengths and our weaknesses, but our competitors' strengths and weaknesses. What is it that they're missing? What audiences are they not serving? Well, they've created this wonderful show, this great piece of music, but there's a whole community that's not exposed to it. Is that an area? Is that an opportunity for me? Has that become a niche market for me? So somebody else's weakness becomes an area of opportunity or strength for you. So it's not looking at their weaknesses so that you can hurt them. It's looking at their weaknesses so they don't have enough resources to serve everybody. So that creates an area of opportunity, a niche market for you. So not only what our competitors are missing, you have to analyze yourself. Well, I've been producing this type of art. I've been serving this audience for a long time. Well, who am I not? Who am I not sharing my gift with? Who has not been exposed to what I do and how I do it that needs it, especially now where people really are in need of uplifting. They're really in need of being reminded there are things that are greater and bigger than us. And all of us are part of that. We're all connected at a quantum physical level. I'm not getting mystical here. This is science, okay? You want to get mystical, we can, but guess what? This is science. At a quantum level, we're all made up of, same atoms and like everybody else, okay? So what happens here is we need to be reminded of that. There are people trying to pull us apart and people trying to work against those things. Guess what? Artists remind us of the big things, the important things in life, those big emotions, those big feelings. Artists remind us of our humanity. So have you been true to that? What's your weakness? How are you reminding us of our humanity, of our compassion, of our love for each other? Have you been strong in that area or weak in that area? So when we talk about what's your weakness, I'm taking this to a much deeper level with you because you are creatives. And I expect from you to go to a much deeper level. This is not just business 101. Many of you out there have 20 and 30-year careers behind you. So what we're trying to do is release your creativity onto your business practice now, so that you can take it to a level that hasn't been taken before. So this is not just, strengths and weaknesses, a basic SWOT analysis. You know what? We wouldn't be online at 9 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday if all it was that. You can get that in the book. Okay, we're here to talk about the deep stuff with you. Okay, take it to another level, right? So that's where we're at. Next slide. Now I want to talk about branding. So why the cowboys, right? Why the cattle? Well, that's what branding comes from, right? Branding is about, right? You would grow cattle, okay? You'd raise the cattle down in Colorado or Texas someplace, but it wasn't sold there. It was sold in the meat markets up in Chicago, okay, where they distributed it. So what happens is you would brand, put a mark on your cow, so when they got to market, people would know, hey, that came from the QZ Ranch. And I've been down to QZ Ranch and I know how they raise their cattle. I'm willing to pay a little bit more because they raise their cattle quality. Good, feed them good food, they give them exercise, that's good meat, right? So you would brand something. So branding inherently talks about the quality of your work. Branding, again, talks about the quality of your work. It's not the logo. It's not your catchphrase. When we talk about developing a brand, we're talking about how do you communicate the quality. And the quality talks about the experience I'm going to have, right? So branding talks about what? Quality and the experience. Quality and the experience. So when we talk about branding, that's what we're talking about. Next slide. Okay. So this author is a brand, right? And if you look at her photograph, look at her smile, look at the background on that photograph, look at the colors they're using. Look at the covers of her books. Sharp, crisp, easy to read. Well, what does she write? She writes mystery novels. She writes thrillers, so on and so forth. They're very sharp. They're very, very. So what happens is everything about her brand is about the experience, the color usage, okay, the text, the photograph itself, right? And I'm going to show you the difference now. Next slide. Many of you familiar with this author also. Okay, now look at the use of color. Right? Look at the images on her books. Well, she writes a different type of story. She writes a different type. Okay, now there's something important for you to understand. I don't want you to miss it. These are two phenomenal female authors, right, that are writing, and they're both out there selling books. What does that mean? There's room for everyone out there. There's room for everyone out there. But what they have done is they've created a unique voice for themselves. a voice that people want to hear, right? And because they want to hear it, right, they have developed this brand. So you notice the photographs. Go back a slide, please. So you see this crisp, clear. Look at that clear white. Just it's a slightly off color, white background. Look at the clothes. Okay, muted tone, right? Sharp. Look at the angle of the head. Next slide. And look at the difference there. The warmer colors. Okay, again, more muted tones in the book covers. Okay, so branding is about the way it looks. Okay, that encompasses things like the logo and so on and so forth. And that, you know, some of you are very, very good at this, and you understand the use of color and the connections to emotions. And you know, we don't even get into that with many of you because you're experts in it. But the point is, branding is just beyond the visuals. What this is when you see one picture, you have a different experience than when you see the other picture. When you look at one cover, you have a different experience. It's telling you a story, right? It's letting you know at a subliminal level almost, okay, what the story is going to be about. Okay, so therefore that brand is telling you about the quality. So the Allende name already tells you the quality of the story. The Ivanovich name tells you the quality of the story. You know what you're going to get. You know what the experience is going to be. That's what branding is about. That's what the best brands do for us. Next slide. I'm sure you know who this is, okay? Even if I didn't have his name there, you know who that is, okay? Next slide. And I'm sure you know who he is, right? Now, again, less here in the use of color and use of things like that, but more in they're so famous and they're so well known that their name lets us know everything about them. The name has become the brand in itself. So what happens is each of them have worked with phenomenal artists throughout their careers. Okay, so any of you in the music business would love to be produced by either of these professionals, either of these trendsetters here, right? So what happens though is each of them have created a niche for themselves in the music industry, and they're both dominant in their areas. And if I was a musician, I would love to work with either of them. Okay, but the thing is, again, they both exist in the music industry. There's room for both. Okay, a David Foster and a Quincy Jones. Yes, two geniuses in their area, and there's room for both of them and others. There's others that do this work. So there's room for you to make your brand, to make your statement. That's the point. Next slide. If we haven't said it, here it is for you. Your art is a business. Just relax and just accept that for a minute. Now, whether we have accepted this or understood it is different. I'm giving you license and permission to accept it now. Your art has always been a business, or it's a hobby. If it's a hobby, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But then call it a hobby. But if you're a professional artist, then it's always been a business. Whether we handled it that way is a different story. All right? Whether we handled it that way is a different story. And what this process of this series that the Broward Cultural Division and Art have brought to you is a process of you beginning to get your toolkit filled with the tools and strategies you need to have an effective art business, an effective art career, a profitable art career. And we assume that's why you're online now, is because you've made a commitment to yourself and to us that you're serious about this, that you are taking notes, and you're answering the question, what is my idea? Who should invest in my idea and why? Who benefits? How much will these things cost? Where am I going to get this money from? How will I use this money? Am I being conscientious, concise? Can I measure? Do I know when I've won? Do I know how many tickets I have to sell to make a profit on this thing? So I can give a return to my investors, and guess what? They'll invest in my next show. So there's nothing wrong with thinking about it that way. Now, I am not saying, and you should never do this, we never ever recommend that you take this type of thinking. This is just it's as if you spoke different languages, right? Business language is for the business environment, and the art language is for the art environment. So what do I mean by that? When you're in the studio creating, you never think about these things. Do not pollute your studio with business thoughts. Don't do that. The studio is like a sacred area where you create purely. You don't think about money. You don't think about, if you're painting it, worrying about how you're going to sell it, it's probably not going to come out good. And if you're dancing, worrying about who might pay for it, it's probably not a good dance. That has to come from a different place. What we're giving you is just a different language here. So when you leave the studio, you're able now to deal in that language and understand and speak in a language so that you're effective, so that what's produced in the studio, okay, can now turn into something profitable. While you're in the studio, that's not the business part of it. In the studio is not business. In the studio is creativity. That's where you're just free of creativity. You don't worry about any of the things we talked about, numbers or anything. You're free to do everything that you do. So when we come out of that creative mode, that's when we go into business mode. And many of you are actors, so you're very good at doing this. You know, it's a role, right? You're this person in the morning, and you're this person at night, and you go home, and then you're you. Okay, and you understand that intimately. You understand it down to the psychology, and you study that. You study how the person has maybe a tick with their hand, and when you're acting, you're doing that with their hands, but you don't do that at home. That's you, right? So that's your art. That's your genius. Okay, so we can learn from our friends that are doing acting in that. When you're an artist, you're an artist. When you're a business person, you're a business person. When you go home, you're you. Okay. Now, these are just different things that you learn, different skill sets. But your art is and has always been a business, and let's handle it that way. So now we can call ourselves professional artists and really mean it. Next slide. Now, this is a book that I recommend, even if you're not in the music industry. If you look at that note closely, you see there's a fish hook there. Look at it closely. There's a little fish hook, because this book is called A Song Machine. Pretty good book. Okay, I mean, it's not as exciting as anything that Allende would give you, but you know, it's a different type of book, right? But it's inside the hit factory, and what they talk about is how popular music is created, and how limited the scope is, and how many folks, okay, actually creating these hits for a lot of artists, right? So it's an interesting book to see the inner workings, because one of the things that you have to do as you grow as a professional is you must become an expert at your industry. You have to be an expert at your industry. No one should know your industry better than you. That's part of you being a true professional in your art form, is knowing the history. Okay, so whether you learned it in a formal education or informal education, you should know the history of your art form and the history of art in general that you claim to be part of. What's the trajectory? Who are the leading speakers? Who are the historical figures? And you should know the current state of affairs. So that if we asked you to give a presentation like this on your art form, you'd be able to do it. No reason that you couldn't step up and do this. So if you consider yourself a painter, right, then you need to talk about painting. You need to be able to talk about the chemical structure of the paint. You need to talk about why cadmium paints, okay, are so dangerous. Right? Because the chemical cadmium is poisonous. But anyway, why? Right? So you understand how right now in the industry, desperately trying to find out, hey, how can we turn oil paint into an environmentally friendly type of medium? Okay? So why is it that Rafael Cruz is talking about business, knows these things about art? Well, you should know these things about art. Okay? There's a difference between being self-taught and self-educated is fine, but the point is to have an education. Whether you got it yourself, you got it in a school, the point is to have it, so you know about what's happening. This is very, very important, right? Because art is a broad and it's a long subject. It's been around for a long time, and it will be around for a long time. So we have to pay respect and homage to that, right? And this book is an interesting insight into popular music and how it's made, all right? And how it's turned around, and so if you're in that area, it's a good book for you to read. Okay, and there's tons of other good books. Go to a library, all right, or drop by a library and pick up some books. I love libraries. I love books. So a plug for the libraries. Keep them alive, right? Knowledge is very important. Okay, next slide, please. Does anybody know who this is? I'll give you a minute. The Mask is a dead giveaway, right? Phantom of the Opera there, okay? So the important thing is not that you know his name, that you know it is Phantom of the Opera. Next slide. This is the important part for our conversation. Take a minute to read this. I'll read it for you. The Phantom of the Opera may be the most successful entertainment franchise of all time. It has grossed $5.6 billion with a B worldwide. That's $1 billion US worldwide. More than Avatar, more than Titanic, more than all the Star Wars films combined. A staggering 130 million people have seen the show in 28 countries and 148 cities in 13 languages. When you think about that, how many people have been inspired and moved by this production, right? How much money has been made, okay? You see the impact that art can have and has had on the trajectory of humanity, history, and individual people's lives, right? The story of the Phantom of the Opera, what it's really about, the underlying themes, so on and so forth. Okay, why has this show been so successful? Okay, so there is a business side to what we're doing here in the creative world, and always has been, right? So it's important for you to think about these things also, right? When you're creating, not in the studio, but afterwards, hey, how is this seen as a business? How are these things being looked at? Okay, next slide, please. Does anybody recognize this young man? If you don't recognize him here, maybe you recognize him in the next slide. There we go. Okay. If you haven't seen Hamilton, I urge you to see it. Okay, it's a wonderful show. All right. And people made a big issue that it was in rap, but I mean, if I recall, Shakespeare also wrote rhymes. So just a different cadence, different music, different rhythm. But I love the fact that this young man went back in time and into the present deeply, all right, and produced a show that has been just phenomenal, right? It's been a phenomenal show. I mean, and now it's streaming on Disney Plus, all right? So you didn't even have to go to a theater to see it. You can see it literally at the comfort of your home, okay? But again, for our conversation today, we're not talking about the level of work and the creativity. It's a phenomenal show, and so is the Phantom. Next slide. This is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the business side of it today. So investors in the hip hop musical, okay, Hamilton, have made an unprecedented returns of roughly 600%, according to one investor, on an initial investment of about $12.5 million. That means it cost them $12.5 million to put on the show, and they've made roughly 600% investment, right? Now I have to put that in context for you. The stock market, the US stock market, the whole stock market, over any 30-year period gives you about a 9 to 11% return after taxes. 9 to 11% if you invest money and you keep it there for 30 years, okay, in the whole stock market. And that would be called indexed to the total stock market. So if you bought a mutual fund that was indexed to the total stock market, I'm not going to explain that as your CPA or financial advisor. Okay, yeah, these are things you have to learn about, okay? Because you're going to be rich one day, right? So you get an index mutual fund to the stock market. It purchases the whole stock market over any 20 to 30-year period. You get an average 9 to 11% return. That's after cost and taxes. So to get a 600% return is unheard of. That's what Hamilton did for its investors. Gave them a 600% return. That's why they took the risk. Now, many of you may not know this, but before Hamilton, okay, Lin-Manuel Miranda, okay, had written, okay, another show that was successful, but it was a smaller production. And because of the success of that, people were willing to invest in the Hamilton idea. Right? Now, there's a documentary about how he goes through creating Hamilton and he locks himself in a hotel room in his creative process. I urge you to watch that because it is a phenomenal documentary if you can find it. All right, to watch about this. But the whole point of this is two of the most lauded and critically acclaimed shows have also been financial and business successes. That's the point of it. All right, that's the point of it. Okay, so whether you like these shows or you don't like these shows, or whatever the case is the reality is the reality. They've been phenomenal successes, both on the creative side and on the business side. All right, so we're talking about these are real world examples that you should learn from. Okay, these are the masters that we are apprenticing to, whether we are official apprentices or not. If I'm in the theater business, guess what? I want to learn as much as I can from these two masters. Okay, if I'm in the music business, I want to learn as much as I can from Quincy Jones. Okay, whether he knows it or not, I want to study his biography. Whatever it is. Okay, so that's how we learn from our competitors, from our masters, those who are blazing the trail before us. Right. Next slide, please. Okay, little brain relaxer there. Right. Next slide. So now, with that, what we want to do is we want to open up for any questions that you might have, anything specific. Now, if you have a question that I can't answer because it's very specific, okay, I'll say we'll take that offline. If it's a question that we can answer that's for everybody, that helps a general group, and we'll do that. So if you have any questions or anything like that, or anything about the production so far, let us know. Okay, so you have the comments there. So let's open it up to questions, Angela. So when you're ready.
Yeah. And I am ready. Thank you for that presentation. So we have the ticker up there, and we'll give people some time to think on some questions. But while I was listening to your presentation, I like some of the things that you're saying. So I'll bring that to point, and maybe that'll drive some ideas for everybody else. Sure. I like during your presentation how you happened to mention that why should somebody invest during the pandemic? And I like how you pose a lot of questions to everybody to really think on, because I think as creative people, we're so used to just producing, and we forget to stop. Let me think, why am I even doing this? Why are people wanting to invest right now? So what do you say to the artist that's watching out there and says, I don't have time to stop and think about someone that wants to invest in my product? How do they really take the time right now where it feels very intense and where it may be isolated? What do you say to that person?
This is going to sound harsh, Angela, but I was brought into this because I'm very direct and I'm very honest, and I treat artists as adults. So any artist that would say to me, I don't have time to think about the people that are being impacted by my art, they're either selfish or misguided. Because if you have this gift, okay, and it is a gift. Not everybody can produce great works of art. Not everybody can. Many people try, few achieve. Right? And if you've invested the 10, the 20, the 30 years to really master your craft, to become a master, and you're not thinking about how it impacts others, that's why nobody knows you. Point blank simple. If you're locked away in a studio and you think that you can just create, well, then somebody else has to be getting that art out there for you. Okay? The time where you can think that it's possible to be this isolated hermit back in a cave producing things and somebody else sells it for you. No. Right now, people, they don't just buy the art. They're buying the connection to the artist. And what you have to understand is that when I watch a great dancer, or when an audience watches a great dancer, and that dancer jumps 20 feet into the air, we are flying with them. And if you don't understand that, then you don't understand why you have your gift. So that's why this is important. So yeah, the side of it, yeah, let the money and the thing, and and a lot of people, there's this philosophy about you're selling out. Well, guess what? Then Michelangelo sold out, Leonardo da Vinci sold out, Mozart sold out, Quincy Jones is selling out. Everybody's selling out. No, it's not selling out. All that is they're counting how many people are impacted by their work. Mm-hmm. So for every dollar, they know another person was positively impacted by their work. Because what you have to ask yourself is, if what you're doing is truly valuable and it's truly life-changing, then it's criminal if you don't share it. So you need to get out of the studio. And especially now, we're having this presentation during a pandemic. Look at us, we're at home. Okay, so this is all, it's critical that you remind people that there's more life, okay, than this. What are the grand themes of life? What's beautiful about life? What makes us all one? We have to be reminded of that. And if this virus has reminded us, we are all fragile human beings in a transient time. How long do we live? 100 years, maybe? You know, on average, 80, 75, we take care of ourselves if we're lucky. Brief little time compared to a tree, compared to a river or a mountain. And artists, I'm talking poetically like this. Why? Because artists, this is the language of art. Okay, if we were talking just to business people, we can't talk about that. They think we were asking about, my meaning. Yes, this is what it's all about. And if all we have to do is learn a little bit of numbers and a couple of vocabulary, come on, you learn music theory, you learn color theory, I watched Hamilton and I can't imagine how they memorized the lines and then set it to music.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I'm not an actor. I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to do it. I can't even imagine having that kind of gift. And you're telling me that you can't learn a couple of words for business so you could get a loan? Of course you can. Don't let fear or some bad thing that you learned about selling out be the thing that prevents you from being the next Quincy Jones. Okay? You know, I want to see your Hamilton. I want to see your Phantom. We need to see it because we need to be reminded that there are things in this life that are much more profound and they give life meaning. Otherwise, without artists and musicians and actors, it's all gray. There's no music, there's no color, there's no drama. Who wants to live that life? Nobody. So without you, the artist, it's all gray. No, we don't want that. You know, we don't want that. So that's why, Angela, it's important. You know, so that's why the work that you're doing at Art Hive, the work that the team at the Cultural Division is doing is so important. That's why I tell people, I'm not giving a plug. And folks out there that are listening to this, I don't work for Art Hive or the Cultural Division. And I wouldn't be on this if they weren't good partners. I only work with the best, and that sounds arrogant, but it is what it is. I'm old enough now that I can say it like it is. Put yourself up with the best. Don't lowball yourself.
Thank you.
Good. They make me look and sound much better than I look and sound. Trust me. And the Broward Cultural Division have been doing this for a long, long time. Go on their website, see what they're doing. Your county should be doing it like them. They are a model nationally. Okay, yeah. They do. Phenomenal group of people. And you should have, I wish everybody had an artistic community like we have here back home in our backyard. I mean, it really is wonderful, the things that they're doing. And you should have that kind of support. And if you don't, then become a virtual member of our arts community. Okay, but you should be surrounded by people that think like you and challenge you to be your best self, to create your next greatest work. Okay, this is not a journey that you should be taking alone. That's the other thing. Okay, solitary art. Sometimes you have to create it by yourself because that is part of the process, but you have to get out of that, all right, and be challenged by other people that can really challenge you because they know good art, right? So that's what we talk about when we talk about why should we be thinking about, all right, hey, who's impacted by my art and why should they care?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're asking them to spend money that they could be spending on bread for their family, right? No, we want them to come to our show, $100 ticket, as opposed to $100 worth of bread for my family. That's the answer. That's the question. But guess what? Bread feeds you one time. To change your life. So you see there? That's the value. That's the clincher. That's the hook. That's what becomes important. Okay?
All right. Well, Rafael, thank you so much for that. And we have some questions that have been flooding in, so I want to make sure to try to address them. We have one here that says, can you speak to the 80-20 rule or how important or right that rule is for creating and for business?
Yeah, the 80-20 rule. Okay, somebody getting fancy there. The Pareto principle. Okay, It comes from economics, all right? And basically it talks about, and that's a test for me, because what if I didn't know what the 80-20 rule was, right? Maybe you think you were smart enough to know what the 80-20 rule is, right? So,
well, when I think about the 80-20 rule, I think about it pertaining to content creation and how much you should share, if that's what they're pertaining to. And 80% sharing of other content, 20 of your own. I'm not sure if that's...
And the 80-20 rule, I want you to think about the 80-20 rule is this, okay? Don't think about it in terms of how important or right that rule is for creating and business. Think about it this way. This is how you should apply the 80-20 rule. Think about your time. 80% of your time right now is spent on, you're only getting 20% return on it. So you're wasting a lot of time. And 20% of your time is producing 80% of your results. So what's more important for you is to discover, what is the 20% of your time that you're spending? What are the 20 out of the 10 things you do in a day? Only two of them are responsible for 80% of your results. You need to start there, because if you get that right, everything else flows from that. Where you invest your time, which is the only thing we have in life, is time, right? That's the only thing that you invest and never get back, is time. I can't replace these minutes for you. They're gone, they're lost. So either you got something from them or you didn't. So was this thing that you did, is it part of the 80% of the results you get, or is it part of the not so good results you get? So that's where you think about the 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule applies to a lot of things. Mm-hmm. Selling, and you have 10, and I keep using 10 because it's easy to do an 80-20, right? 10, you got 8 and 2. All right, so if you have 10 patrons that buy your art, 2 of them buy 80% of your art. And the other 8 complain and cause you problems and so on and so forth, but they only buy 2 pieces of art. So do you really need those 8 people? Or should you be focusing on the 2 people that buy 8 works of your art? So the 80-20 rule can be applied in a lot of different ways.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the ways you should apply it, okay? So you need to be very careful, though, when you don't use the 80-20 rule as an excuse. Use it as a discipline, okay? The 80-20 rule should discipline you to always be thinking. I like to divide it when I talk to people and I'm helping them structure their schedules and things. 80-20 rule, 10-hour workday, right? 2 hours, 6 hours, 2 hours. That's 10. What are the 2 hours I wasted that I should not be doing? What are the 6 hours that are getting average results? And what are the 2 hours where I'm killing it? You should know what time of day that you're the best at. You should know what things that you're the best at. And those 2 hours a day, they should be at the time that you're the best at and with the things that you're the best at and the things that only you can do. If somebody else can do it, why are you doing it? So if painting is what you do, then you need to spend 2 hours a day of solid painting, undisturbed painting, creative painting work, because nobody else can produce the artwork. So do I need you filling out the content on your Facebook? No. That's a 20%. No. Let somebody else do that. You need to be spending that 20% key time to get that 80% result. Why? 20% paint, because without paintings, we can't sell anything. 80% result. Okay? I hope that answered your question, at least in a short way.
So here's another great question by Sarah Page. What's a gracious way to respond to someone who's asking you to work for free?
Part of the culture is that a lot of people think it's okay to ask artists to work for free. They don't ask their doctor to work for free. They don't ask their lawyer to work for free, right? So why do they ask another professional to work for free? And you say, now, here's the thing. One, you stop using the word free, okay? And you turn the question back around. Also, what you're asking me is to contribute to your project in a pro bono fashion, right? So you can ask them, oh, are you asking me to contribute to your project through my art, through my creativity, through my profession, in a pro bono fashion? You want me to contribute to you? Oh, yeah, that's what we mean. You know, we want you to, we want a couple of your pieces to put up in our restaurant. Say, okay, generally, though, what happens is, what I get is I get a listing on your website, okay? I get my brochures up, the concierge is giving it out to everybody that walks in the door, okay? I put prices on my artwork, and you let people know as they come in that the artwork is for sale, right? That's how I normally structure that. And if we can put that in writing, I'm willing to do that for you for 2 months. Okay. And then at the end of those 2 months, you open up your restaurant for a showing for my work after hours. So you see what I did there? I turned it around from a for free to a for value for me. So instead of me incurring costs to market my work and now have to rent a studio or someplace like that or a gallery to show my work, now I got a high-end restaurant that after hours is going to be a show for me, okay? And I'll pay the restaurateur to cater it. So I invite a closed show, okay? Maybe pre-gallery show or something like that, closed to my top, remember my 20% patrons? I invite them to that restaurant where they can see show and they get first access to my work. They might want to buy something before I open it up to everybody else. So you saw what I did there? I took it from something that's worked for free. No, I don't do that anymore. You don't have to get insulted. You're a business person. You take off your artist hat, you go right into negotiation mode. I like the word business. Many of you speak Spanish, and the word business in Spanish is negocio. And the reason I like that word, because it reminds me, it sounds just like negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
It's negotiable. You should always be working on a deal that's good for them, good for you. If they really want your work up in that restaurant, then they should be able to work with you. Okay? And they will respect you a lot more because they guaranteed did not expect you to come back with a business response. They expected you to come back to them with a desperate artist response. Oh my God, you want to put my work up in your restaurant? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I know I'm good. Of course you want my work in your restaurant. Why wouldn't you? You're trying to get people back in the restaurant after a pandemic. You want everything you can to get them in there, right? So guess what? Let's turn this into something that works for both of us. And let's sit down and talk about it. So Paige, Sarah, did that answer your question?
I think it did. I think what you made me think of is not being afraid to set your own terms, because everything you said was completely rational. Nothing you said was so extreme, but just having that script prepared in your mind as to what will I do if this occurs. I want to go to one more question before we have to wrap up. I thought this was a great question. So how would you, first of all, saying thank you, Rafael, and how would you suggest finding potential investors once you have a great plan?
I get nervous when somebody says they have a great plan and I haven't seen it yet, right? So you said it was great, right? And that, we're having fun. We're having fun with, I guess it's Hits Nixon. Okay, so we're having fun there. But thanks for the question. It is a great question. Okay, but one, make sure whoever's saying the plan is great is really saying it's great. And that's the first person I'd ask about investing. See, that's why I did that. Because if they're saying, first of all, no one should be reading your plan unless they are a potential investor of something. They're going to invest time, passion, or money. So otherwise, why are they reading your plan? Either they can add value to the plan itself because they can help you structure, write the plan better, look at your numbers and analyze them, so you're getting that type of help. Or they're looking at your plan because the plan is done. Okay, it's not a proof, it's not a draft, it's a done plan. And now it's out for the real world. So it's not in edit mode, it's in real world mode. Now it's out there representing you. So why would somebody be reading your plan unless they were an investor? So the thing is, only potential investors should be reading the plan. And how you go about not suggest finding, I'll tell you exactly how to find. I'm not suggesting, I'm going to tell you how to find them. Okay? One, people who've invested you in the past into you. People who've invested in your work in the past is where you start, right? Two, you go out into the artist community, okay, and you go out into your community, all right, and you start learning, reading, and mingling, and finding out who are the people that are investing in this type of work. Who are the agencies, organizations, and groups that are investing in this type of work? And you start to do your due diligence on them and see what type of work they invest in, and see if your work aligns with their mission, their meaning, their vision. Then you present. Sometimes you have to alter your plan to align it with the mission of an organization or something like that, or a group of investors, where you first wrote your plan one way, but it does fit their mission or their vision, but you're not speaking their language. So you alter the plan a little bit. You don't change your creativity, you alter the plan, the language of the plan, so it fits. And you never, ever, ever do a cold call. Always a warm call. You know someone that knows someone that knows someone, and that someone is the person you need to meet. Work through your network. I don't understand why people have 1,000 people on their social media. I have 1,000 friends on Facebook, and you don't know anybody when you need them, right? So if you're on LinkedIn, then you need to be keeping those things alive. You need to be working those things, and that's how you get investors, okay? And what you need is 1 or 2 key investors. And I don't like to call them investors, all right? Think about them being believers, okay? Evangelists, all right? Whatever. They need to really believe in what you're doing, because what they will do is they will attract investors. Because what happens is, if you're an artist, and especially if you're a young and up and coming artist, if you're well known, this is a lot easier to do. But if you're not that well known and you're an artist that's just coming in mid-career, beginning career, and you're trying to grow this thing, what happens is, I'm more willing as an investor to invest in something that a sophisticated investor that I know is taking a risk on, than me just looking at your plan and saying, whoa, I like it, but I don't know. I want somebody else to. But if somebody else is already doing it and I respect them, boom, I'm there with them. Okay. So a good initial investor or 2 initial investors will attract other investors. That's how it happened with Manuel Miranda and folks like that. They usually have 1 or 2 or 3 key investors, and once they come on board, the other investors jump in. Because you have the large initial investors and you have the smaller investors that come in. And you have to watch, because various types of investment, if it's equity investment, they're going to want to own it. And once they own it, then all of a sudden they want to go past the business side of it into the creative side of it. And that's where you need the good lawyer. No, you own the business side, but you don't get into the creative side, unless that's the deal that you want to set with them. If they have a creative background, then maybe you want that investor. But they can dilute your show and dilute the meaning of your show or your art if you let them into the creative side. This is the legal stuff that you do with your legal advisors. All right. So I hope we answered that question in the short time that we had.
Yes, and I know, unfortunately, we have to break here, but I know one of the other questions somebody had asked is, do you offer coaching, or how can people continue to find you if you do offer coaching, or if you don't? What are some ways people can continue to connect with you after this show?
The best way is to reach out through the Broward Cultural Division. Okay, our friends over there, I want to focus you to reach out to them, okay, because they're the organizations doing this, so that they'll know that you're reaching out. And anybody that's interested in reaching me can send an email to them, okay, to Jim Shermer specifically, okay, or Madeline specifically. And what'll happen is they'll send you my email. Now I'm based out of South Florida, so if I can't give you a quick chat and help you out or something like that, we get you some help where you are, okay? Because the Small Business Development Center in at least South Florida, we have an arts program, okay, the Creative Entrepreneur Development Program, that we work in conjunction with the county, right, and the Cultural Division. Now, not everybody has one of those, but getting you to talk to somebody about business, we can definitely get you some help there. All right, so don't worry about that. But I definitely told you to reach out first to the Cultural Division in Broward County. All right, they're great people over there, and they're waiting to hear from you. And again, if not, Angela and her team over at Art Hive, they can. And if you're not tapped into their website and what they're doing, please do so you can see how to do it. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Rafael, and have a wonderful afternoon today.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for all the positive comments. Appreciate it. Have a good.
All right. We are going to take a break, but we're going to be back. So take your break and meet us back here at 10:45 for a very interactive workshop. See you soon. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's Angela here, and welcome to Business Skills for the Modern Creator, presented by the Broward Cultural Division. And I'm really excited for this session because public speaking coach Gigi Rosenberg will lead participants through the 10 steps of showing up online. So whether you're introducing yourself through a virtual meeting or leading an online gathering. So this interactive event, you will learn how to introduce yourself to the latest creative projects. And she's also going to do something really cool. She is going to have on-the-spot live coaching today. So this is going to be very interactive. But before we get started, of course, I have to tell you a little bit about Gigi now. Gigi Rosenberg is a public speaking coach who works with CEOs, nonprofit leaders, artists, authors, and women on the rise to help them connect with their audiences with clarity, authenticity, and warmth. She's been a guest commentator on the Oregon Public Radio, been published by Psychology Today and Publishers Weekly, and has performed at the United Solo Theater Festival in New York City. In 2010, she wrote the popular book, The Artist's Guide to Grant Writing, now in its 6th printing. And she's a former editor of the national business magazine, Professional Artist. So we are going to let Gigi take it away.
So about 10 years ago, a colleague of mine was at a dinner party. It was actually in Florida, this dinner party. And she's a novelist, and she arrived at the dinner party with something very special, which was we used to call them elevator pitches, but since we're not in many elevators these days, now I'm trying to call them introductions to her latest creative project, which was this novel she was writing. And at the dinner party, there were a few strangers there, and everybody introduced themselves. And Ellen was ready to introduce herself. She very quickly and easily explained what her novel was about, what the title was, what the theme was, why she was writing it. And she ended with something that we'll talk about today, which was a call to action, what she really wanted her listener to do. And at that moment in time, what her call to action was as she was working on this creative project is she wanted to find a grant for $25,000 to pay for childcare and her time so she could take the time off to finish this book. Well, lucky for her, she sat next to somebody at the party who'd heard her introduction. They continued talking because the other very, very important thing about your introduction is, one of the things I don't like about the word and the term elevator speech or elevator pitch is it sounds like that's like a monologue. You're just going to get up and just like start talking. But the truth is, the reason that you want to have a great introduction is so that it begins a conversation with whoever you're talking to. And you really have to be ready because as artists, when we're making the work, some of us do, but more often, most of us don't really know why we're making the work. We may not even know what the work is actually about at all. So it takes some stepping back and questioning and really a different kind of creative work to write a great introduction. And Ellen had done that work. So she sits next to this guy and they continue their conversation. And by the end of this dinner, he had said, yes, I would like to grant you the $25,000 to finish this project. Now, I know this is a very, it's a dramatic story, but I tell the story, and it's actually one of the stories I tell in my book, The Artist's Guide to Grant Writing, which you can get at your library or at a local bookseller. But the reason I tell the story is because it's just such a great example of what can happen when you have a really good introduction that's really ready to tell. Now, you might be thinking, hey, I'm not going to be going to any dinner parties anytime soon. And that's okay, because there are so many places that you can be introducing yourself, even now that we're all spending a lot of time in our own spaces and not with people in person. So just to give you some examples of where you could be introducing yourself, If you're going to do a short video, right at the beginning, you're going to give your little introduction, that 2 or 3 or 4 sentences about who you are and what you do and what your art is about. When I go to professional meetings now on Zoom, often we'll go around and introduce ourselves. So I'm often, it's a great place to practice your introduction. I might use it on the street, running into a neighbor, 6 feet apart, masks on, that kind of thing. I know there's been a lot of virtual gallery openings recently and gallery talks that artists are doing. So that's a great, great, great place to also practice your introduction. And, I was listening to Rafael's talk today, which was so good. And, he talked about at the end there about how never make a cold call, right? Well, even on a warmed up call, which basically means you have an introduction to the person, you got to have your little elevator speech or your little introduction all ready to go. Hi, I'm Gigi Rosenberg, and I'm the author of et cetera, et cetera. And the reason I'm calling you is et cetera, et cetera. Very few of us can have these words flow perfectly out of our mouths the first time we say them. And your introduction can be used for so many other things. It can go at the end of your email. It can go in your email. The business plan that he was talking about that you'd be writing, there's going to be a version of your elevator pitch or introduction in that. And, there's so many similarities between a business plan and a grant. So even grants that you write, you're going to have a version of your elevator pitch in there. So I just want you to realize that all the work it takes to introduce yourself well is going to pay off in so many ways. So before we dive in, and first of all, I'll just tell you how today's going to work. I'm going to give you a few little pointers about how to show up online and really look and sound your best. Because for the next who knows how long, this is going to be the forum you're in. So I just want to make sure you're going to look and sound your best doing that. Then I'm going to take questions Then I'm going to give you a little lesson on how to write your introduction. I'm going to take questions and answers. And then most of the time today, we're going to spend with on-the-spot coaching from me. And I'll get into the details of exactly how we're going to do that. But briefly, you're going to type your introduction into the comments, and we're going to go through and cover as many as we can. So my goal for you today is really to leave with 5 to 10, if you're really listening, tips for introducing yourself in this new format we're in. And what I would recommend you do is, there's so much on our minds, even on a Saturday, with so much going on in our personal and public lives right now, that I would just encourage you to just clear the desk off. If you can put this on full screen, that would be great. When I teach, I give directions, which I'm going to give you now. Turn everything else off on your computer, hide your phone. I put a sign on my door. I mean, I know I needed to put a sign on my door, but it's a great thing to do for the other people who might be in your household. But just so you can really focus on today. And we're going to be having you do a little bit of writing. I like using a pen and paper for writing. I am going to have you type a little bit later, but if you just want to keep everything closed and use a pen and paper, that I think would really, really be great. So let's dive in now to how to really look and sound your best in this format. Some people call these my vanity tips. I mean, yes, you will look and sound better, but you can't get your message across unless people can hear you, unless they can see you. So I'm going to start with the basics. There are basically 3 basics. And number 1 of the basics is to raise your computer. So you want to basically have it so that when you look across at your laptop or look across at your phone or your iPad or whatever you're doing this on, that the camera lens is really pretty much right across from your eyes. Otherwise, you're going to get those horrible angles that I'm sure you've seen where, you're looking up at the neck of the person, who's doing it. And a couple times I saw the camera really high. So you really want to have it right across from you. The second thing of the basics is you want to light your face. So what you want to avoid is that look of having a lot of light behind you. So you look like when they interview somebody that you can't see or you can't see your face, that you want to avoid. So you just really want to light your face. And the third thing is that really, really helps is if you have any kind of microphone, it's really great to use it. And it could even be the earpods that came with your iPhone, if you have an iPhone or whatever kind of phone you have. Just to have a little microphone near your mouth will really, really help and be much better than the computer microphone. So if you want to get a little advanced about this, think about how you're framing yourself. So both Angela and I are modeling just really good framing. And what I mean by good framing is you can see my shoulders because, one of the things we lose these days is I'm not physically in the room. So you're only getting like, I don't know, 1/5 of me, right? So you want to be able to see your shoulders and let that background fade away. So I have seen recently, also, I'm just going to do this. People who are like down here don't want to do that. And people who are like really far on the side, unless you're demoing something here, So just think about your framing. You really want to have yourself in the middle, eyes about 3/4 of the way up. And if you need to see some good examples, I'm doing my best to model it, and I definitely Angela is doing it as well. Now, I noticed that a lot of people are not turning their cameras on in those meetings when you can turn your camera on, and I think it's really a great thing to do in terms of building that community. So one thing you can do if you some people don't turn their cameras on, I think, is they're just so close to the camera, but especially if you have a microphone, you can sit back and be a little bit smaller in the screen. So if that helps you turn your camera on, I would recommend that you do that. Now, we talked about your eye line, which is, looking right across at the camera, how important that is. But notice what I said, looking at the camera. So if I'm going to do a little demo here. When I'm looking at the camera, I'm looking at the camera right now, and I'm basically talking to that little black dot. If I were looking at you, and you might be down on my screen, talking to the image I have of you, I would be spending the whole meeting like that. So do you see the difference in that? The difference between that and spending the whole meeting like that? When I look at the camera, that comes across to you as if I'm looking at you. So to maintain good eye contact, you don't have to look at it the whole time, because obviously you want to check in with your audience. I'm going to be looking at my notes later, et cetera, picking up things to show you. But make that camera your home base. Definitely when you open and definitely when you close. And to make that easier for you, you can put a little Post-it up there with a little arrow to remind yourself, this is where I should be looking. So I also did some vocal warm-ups before I got on this call because I wanted my voice to sound as resonant as possible. So that could just be some easy humming or some cheek massages, just those kind of things. Very, very simple to do. So now what I want to do is move on to how to start building your introduction now that you've got some of the basics of just how to show up and look and sound your best in this format. So when you're thinking about your introduction, some of the mistakes that all of us make when we do this is we're so close to the work that we forget about the basics. So I can remember when I wrote my book on grant writing, and I interviewed many people who gave grants. So many of them said that one of the mistakes that artists make just in that first couple of sentences that they write in their grant proposal is they don't say what the project actually is. So like, for example, reading the proposal, people can tell, well, what is this? Is it a dance? Is it a book? Is it an installation? Is it a painting? Is it a series? Et cetera. They just couldn't tell what it was because the writer forgot, oh, these people don't know me. I have to start with the absolute basics. So when you think about your introduction, that's what you want to do. You want to really start with the absolute basics. So what would be the basic place to start? It's your name, right? You want to start with your name. Now, once I did advise somebody not to start with their name because their name was so unusual that it could begin it's a whole other conversation, you know. So this person just didn't want her introduction to start with this whole other conversation about her name, which had nothing to do with her art. So that was the only time I said, you know what, save your name for a little later in your introduction. So start with your name. The next thing you want to do is your title. What are you? Now, some of the problems that artists run into with the title thing is they're so creative. They do so many things. They're a dancer, they're a photographer, they're a painter, the trouble is too many things in a row. And I would say 3 is probably too many things, is just so confusing for the person that you're presenting to. So definitely for today, but in all the work that you're going to do on your introduction, you're going to need a few introductions. So just write like the one that you're going to use when you're standing at the backyard barbecue for people that might not know anything about your art. Or do the one that you're going to use when you're on the phone with a curator who might be a little more sophisticated. You're going to need to write several different ones. So when you get on, get ready to make those calls, those warmed up calls, as Rafael called them, you're going to think, what introduction really fits for this audience member? Because that's another misconception about the introduction is people think, oh, it's all about me. Well, yes, it is about you and your artwork, but it's also crafted and customized to the person that you're talking to. So it really fits with what they need to hear from you. So when you think about your title, I think 1 is great, 2 maybe, 3 I'd really need to question whether it was just too many or if you just needed to make 2 or 3 individual introductions, write them separately. So if what you make isn't clear from your title, then you need to explain what you make. And there's so many cool ways of talking about the uniqueness then of what you make. Like, for example, I was coaching a ceramicist once, and his specialty was, get ready, he made ceramic crocks for making sauerkraut. That's what he did. And I was like, wow, there are not too many other people who have that specialty. So you start to realize, oh, that's going to make me really stand out when I describe in detail what it is that I do. So remember how I was talking about the real purpose of your elevator pitch or your introduction is to start a conversation. That's really what it's all about. And, all the different pieces and details you get out onto the page about what it is that you do will all be things you can use later on in the conversation. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is you don't have to jam it all into those first few sentences. So what you're going to have a chance to do today is you may have your introduction that you've been using, and we're going to give you some time to actually work on that introduction a little bit and write it. So the assignment I'm going to give you today is to take, if you have an introduction, to take a look at it and, maybe do some editing based on even some things you've learned from me today so far. Or if you want to start writing a new one today, again, you're going to start with your name, you're going to start with your title, you're going to talk about what you make. There might be themes that you use, and think about, like, write it for the one person, write it for the person whose restaurant just opened, and you're going to go in and talk to them about putting up a show in their restaurant or the gallery or whatever. Think about the actual situation you're going to be using it for, or the dinner party you're going to where you're just going to give a general introduction about what it is that you do. And just start taking notes now about what you might say actually in that introduction. A place I like to end the elevator pitch on is where my colleague Ellen ended her elevator pitch, which is with a call to action. So her call to action was, "I'm looking for a $25,000 grant. Do you know any people who are granting this to novelists?" That was her call to action. So what is the one thing you'd like someone to do at the end? Is there a question you want to ask them? It could be as simple as, "I'd love to stay in touch with you. What's the best way to do that? Are you on LinkedIn or are you on Instagram or whatever?" But some sort of little baby next step. So whatever makes sense. So like, for example, if you were on the call talking to a potential investor, the next step might not be, "Can you give me $25,000? The next step might be some other little baby step that would be easy for the person to take. So it's great to end on one kind of call to action that makes sense. At a minimum, it could be, "Let's follow each other on social media," etc. So I want to show you a couple of resources that you have access to. Again, I don't want you to get these resources now. I just want you to know they're there. But in terms of looking and sounding your best online, I did make this really cool list of many tips, many more than I'll probably talk about more of these later, but many tips about showing up online that's on my homepage on my website. And actually I made a hard copy of this too. So for people that want to email me, Gigi@gigirosenberg.com, I've been mailing some of these out. So to tell you the truth, the reason I can offer this is very few people contact me for the hard copy. So if a few of you do, I'm happy to mail them to you. But you can also download it on my homepage. And I also have if you just look around my website, I have a few other little workbooks I made. This one is for 5 steps to your elevator speech, which is actually for people who work in many different kinds of businesses besides just the business of being an artist. So it'll have a lot of other things there as well. So what I want to do now is give you some inspiration. And I want to show you read you some examples of what I think are just great or good examples of introductions. So I know another novelist who has a very succinct introduction that I just think is really great. And what she says, her name is Courtney Pierce, that she writes mysteries for baby boomer women. And I'm like, wow, that is like right to it. She tells me who her audience is. She tells me what she's writing. And right away, I know as the listener, oh, am I going to go pick up, Courtney Pierce's mystery for baby boomer women? Is that so? That's such a great way of using your audience to really define, what it really talk about what your specialty is. So I think that really is a great example. Another great example I've got is from Kevin Swallow, and I'm going to tell you where you can read these after I'm done with this. I'm just going to read you Kevin Swallow's elevator pitch or introduction. "I'm Kevin Swallow, an artist who creates paintings and photographs that focus on architecture and cityscapes." So you see what he's doing? Right away, we know what he makes and we know what they're about. "I document older infrastructure elements such as rooftop water tanks, elevated train tracks, steel bridges, and industrial era buildings." Wow. So already I'm starting to get images in my mind of the images that he creates. Great example. I'll give you another artist, Carolyn Rogers. This is her introduction. "Hi, I'm Carolyn Rogers. I create handmade photographic prints with an old-fashioned process, the platinum palladium process." Notice how she's already getting her specialty in. She could have just said, "I'm a photographer," But photographer, in a way, is just so general because there's so many kinds of photographers that she right away tells me what her specialty is. I use the platinum palladium printing process, a time-honored process known for its rich tonal scale and permanence, to create softer, painterly effect and to lend a poetic quality to the images. Oh my God, that really helps. The next part of her elevator pitch, she talks about what her current project is. So she's giving me the title of her project. And then she's telling me where her next exhibition is going to be. And she's ending with asking me if I would like to receive an invitation to that exhibition. Amazing call to action. So I have a question now about, should people start submitting their introduction in the comments now? We're actually going to give you a little 3-minute break to write them. And so you can, why don't you take the 3 minutes? Well, let me think. I guess if you want to start submitting them in comments, you could, but I'm thinking you could also take the 3 minutes just to kind of look over and write your responses as well. So I'm just wondering now if we should take a little time with Angela to see if she has any questions or anybody in the audience has any questions, because I'd love to answer as many questions as I can before we dive into our on-the-spot coaching. So Angela, do you have any questions, or are there any in the audience you want to ask?
Yes, we do have a question. This is from Meg Wallace. I'll populate this here. Can you say interdisciplinary artist if you're using multiple art forms for a particular project?
Oh, that is a great question. I think it's fine to use interdisciplinary artist as long as you can say it. That's doesn't leave you too tongue-tied. Yes. Any tongue-tied words, take out and, find a synonym. The only downside of interdisciplinary artist is we don't know what the disciplines are. So you will need to say right after that, I combine dance, film, and, pasta in my productions, whatever it is. So right immediately go there. And I think it's fine as long as you can just keep it clear. You just don't want to leave your listener confused. People don't want to seem dumb. You know what I mean? So if they don't understand you, many people will think, oh, I guess I'm just too dumb to understand this. And then they won't ask you questions. So that's the only thing to avoid. But great question.
And I do like how you mentioned a call to action. I definitely have never thought of that. And I think that's very clever if it's appropriate to fit that in. What a great way for somebody to really interact with the person that they're talking to. And also creating images. When you mentioned Kevin's, I was envisioning what he was doing and how he was on top of this building and photographing all this stuff. So it was really great visual. And there's so many visual artists out here right now that are listening that can create the exact same thing that I just did in my own mind.
Exactly. Yeah. So you really want to paint a picture in the person's mind of what you're creating, painting, dancing, etc. Yeah.
And I like on your tip sheet for the 7 best online presentation tips, you mentioned something about smiling. And so I know I have had to practice this, because if you don't smile, you come off by accident. You can come off so dry, or you're not excited, even though you probably feel that way inside. How can people practice smiling if it maybe doesn't feel like a natural thing to do on camera all the time?
So, I'll say something about the smiling thing, because a lot of us have heard growing up, oh, you'd be prettier if you smiled. And I just don't want people to think that's what I'm talking about. So let's just clear that away. The thing is, when people get nervous, and this can be in person or, on camera, they can tend to look grim. And grim just isn't inviting. And this whole thing is about inviting, like this is the whole point of even doing an introduction or doing a business plan, is to invite people to experience your work and what you do. So it's not so much to always be smiling, but just think about, if I even put on the littlest Mona Lisa smile, first of all, it actually changes how you yourself feel. You'll feel less grim, which is good, So the tiniest little Mona Lisa smile will help you feel better and then just make you more inviting to your audience. It's really about that, sharing, inviting, and all that stuff. So that's really what it's all about.
We have a question here from Patricia. What might be the difference between having a verbal intro ready and a written description of an author at the end of a published article or essay?
Oh, Patricia, that's such a great question. Thank you. So when we're going to give an introduction, that's something you're going to say. So it needs to sound conversational, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm so glad you said that, because so many, when people first write their introduction, it's very rough. It's very crude. It might sound like a robot is saying it. And we work on that. We make it more conversational, So the one you're going to give verbally is conversational. It should sound like a play script or a film script, how people actually talk. A written description that you'd have at the end of an article or have on the back of your book, your little bio, is going to sound like, it's good if it's being read by somebody. So unless it's your style to be very, very casual, that will sound more formal. So one will be less formal, the one you say, in person, and the one you write at the end of an essay will be more formal. Exactly. So thank you for clarifying that, Patricia. And I just want to say, so many of the ones we're going to read today are going to sound too formal, but we sort of are just assuming, no, we're going to make this sound more conversational. But what we're trying to glean out today is how to get some good content.
Perfect. Another thought I had, you have a guide that's called Introducing Yourself with Authority and Grace, and I like that title. You mentioned that one of the mistakes we all may be making when trying to spark a conversation is not really having a goal in mind. And I thought that was a really clever way of thinking with a lot of intention. So how can one go, and especially in this virtual world now, have a goal in mind when they're speaking to someone they haven't met before?
Right. That's great. So I would, now as you're sort of getting ready to show up in places, is think about, like, for example, if you've got a professional meeting coming up, or you're going to be doing a little video and introducing yourself at the beginning of it, think about what you want people to do at the end of it. So, like, for example, when I introduce myself, I say my name, Gigi Rosenberg. I say who I work with, so people can get an idea. Oh, am I in that group? Then I say, I say that I help people present with authority, authenticity, and I change that up. I can say a sense of calm, a sense of warmth. So it's not really so much about me, but it's what I am eliciting from my clients, what I'm trying to get them to be. And the reason that's nice is because they can think, oh, do I want to be more authentic? Do I want to present with more authority? Do I want to be warmer? Oh, then maybe I should talk to her, So that's what I talk about, having a goal in mind. But, you're going to kind of change that up. Like if I was just going to a neighborhood thing, I might make my introduction a little more casual. And my goal would just be to let people know what I do, and maybe that we would exchange email addresses by the end of it. So now Angela mentioned this guide that I made. I just want you to know the guide I did was actually based on an article I wrote for Professional Artist Magazine about how to do your elevator speech. And then I expanded it and put it on my website, and anybody can look at it. Don't go now. You can go later. And all the ones that I was reading as examples are all in that article, and all the art is in there too. So it's a fun thing to read after this, not during.
And I think we might have some introductions coming through, but until they're finally through, one thing I was also thinking about when you're talking about the elevator pitch, oftentimes an artist might feel like they are being perceived as maybe too arrogant, or maybe they feel awkward presenting their talents right up front. What do you say to someone that says, I don't know if I feel comfortable going right to my call to action? How do you combat that?
Right. So it's so interesting. I was just coaching a group of authors, and one of the authors, when he was introducing himself, was saying things like, was complimenting his work. I forget the exact adjectives, but I'm in the writing is illuminating and, incredible and great and lyrical and fantastic and whatever. And I just said, you know what, you can't compliment yourself. You can describe it like, or talk about what you're intending to do, what your goal is with the work and all that kind of stuff, and describe it actually like, I use a lot of yellow or whatever, or I work with the light, or, whatever it is that you do. But you can't compliment yourself because that's just awkward and weird, know? So that would be an example. I find that people get awkward when they feel like they need to compliment themselves, and then that just feels so unnatural.
Yeah.
So that's an example of how not to be awkward. And, whatever your little invitation is at the end, if it feels awkward, then maybe it's just too much. You know what I mean? Maybe it's just like for example, if someone seems really excited about what I do, I might say, oh, I'll put you on my email list. If they don't seem that excited, I might say, I might just say, let's connect on, what's so great now is you can connect with people on social media and start a small, a relationship at a normal pace, just not jump in too quickly.
Out of curiosity, why do you think that, and I feel like novelists and authors are really good at elevator pitches, and I feel like often in their training to get picked up by publishers, maybe that they just practice that more. Do you find that authors?
I don't think they think that's true.
Oh, okay.
They're used to writing, but the trouble with them is they write too much.
Oh,
so I'll say to them, you've got 2 or 3 sentences, and then they'll present like, a page of copy, and you're like, oh my God, if this is your elevator pitch, people are going to run away from you. So I don't think it's easy for anybody. I know a few people that for whatever reason, they have like a superpower where they can kind of stand back and see what they're doing. But most people really don't. They need help. They need reflection back from other people.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you like us to go now to give time for people to...
Yeah, we're going to take a 3-minute musical break. And you can think about other questions. And you can. What I'd like you to do is write the 2 to 4 sentences of your elevator pitch, like what you would say at a dinner party, what you would say at a backyard barbecue, or what you would say when you're on the phone with an investor. And we'll take a look at them. I will mark, and notice things you're doing well, and then just offer you suggestions for things you can do even better. So just to be absolutely clear, you're going to type them out, and you're going to put them in the comments, and Angela and I will be looking at them and just picking one after another, and we'll fit in as many as we can. So I'm going to stop talking now so we can play our music.
Sounds good. Me too. Okay, so what I'm going to do, Gigi, now is I'm going to start populating their comments. And it looks like some of the comments are getting broken up just because it only allows a certain amount of characters. So if you need me to just go back to one of the previous ones, I'll just click through for you.
So I was going to start. I was just starting to look at them as we on the break. I think I'm going to start with Dave Rosenthal.
Perfect.
Okay, and I'm going to just read. I'll just read. I'll try to chunk it together. So, hi, I'm Dave Rosenthal. I'm a multidisciplinary artist specializing in emotionally evocative fine art, photography, and music composition. So, Dave, I'm just going to give you a bunch of ideas, and this is really a note for everybody. And then you use whatever works for you, because you and I may have different opinions, or you ask 10 different people and you get 12 opinions. So I'm just going to give you everything I'm thinking, and then throw away what's not useful and just keep what really resonates with you. So I hope that makes sense. So I know you have more, but I want to let's just focus on the very beginning. So I would question your use of multidisciplinary there, because it sounds like it's basically photography and music. And it might be clearer if you just said, I'm a photographer and a musician. So maybe, an idea. The other thing is you say emotionally evocative fine art photography. I think what you might want to do is think about what are the emotions that you are attempting to evoke with your fine art photography. What I would do if we were in a coaching session together is I would ask you, and I would actually also look at the work too, and you could have other people look at the work and ask them, what are the emotions? And so we'd make a list of that. And then we'd also talk about what are the qualities? Is there a quality of light? Is there a subject matter? Is there something else you can say? Because when you say emotionally evocative fine art, no images come to my mind at all. It's very cerebral. So painting images in the mind of your listener is usually the best thing. Then I'm going to continue with yours. So both as independent art pieces and combined as unified art pieces, including live performance. So I think it's a little confusing to say independent art pieces. I have to think about, what does he mean independent art pieces? So I would just try to brainstorm what's a better way, a clearer way of saying, solo works, if that's what you mean, and then combined. So I don't even know what the single thing is and what the combined things are. So it's just confusing. I think it's really cool you do live performance, and I'd be wondering, it would lead me to thinking, oh, so do you have anything going on Zoom now? What do are you doing any online things, or, what kind of live performances? There are actually some live things happening in Portland, Oregon, where I live, that are outside right now, that people are doing. So anyway, I have a lot of questions about that, and maybe you could say more. My mission and artist statement is bringing your world to life through the power and emotion of imagery and sound. So you put that in quotes, and I'm wondering if that's a title of something. And if it is, I might just clarify that that's a title. And bringing your world to life. I just would want to, you mean like my world to life? Like I'd want to know, what do you mean by that? And through the power and emotion of imagery and sound. Again, I just want to ask you of what are the emotions, so that I can, you know what it is? I want to feel a little bit of the power and a bit of the emotion while I'm listening to you, because that's going to make me feel like, oh, wow, I want to go experience this. So I would make your elevator pitch a little more powerful and emotional by giving me some more details. I hope that's helpful. So let us go on to, I hope I'm not mispronouncing this name. It looks like Meta. So let's just see where Meta starts. I think it starts right here. Nowadays, I define myself as a creative entrepreneur. My name is Meta Porto, a Brazilian graphic designer who fell in love with patterns and surface design. So I would just think about who I'm introducing myself to. So is it better to lead with creative entrepreneur, or is it better to lead with Brazilian graphic designer? And I don't think one is better than the other. I just think it depends on who you're talking to and what you think might appeal to them, or maybe you'll say both and see where the conversation goes. And then Meta says that they fell in love with patterns and surface design. So I have an issue with saying what it is that you love. And again, it depends on who you're talking to, you know? I think it's great to mention patterns and surface design and then give some examples. But if I've just met you, I might not care so much about what you love because I don't know you yet. If I'm your friend or your mother or your sister or whatever, I'm like, yeah, I want to know what you love. So I just be careful about talking. I know people do that a lot, and I actually used to do that too. But I found that it wasn't as helpful if I'm just meeting somebody because you don't care what I love, right? Okay, let's continue here. Meta then says surface patterns design. Oh, a surface pattern design. I think you mean surface pattern designer is someone who does drawings for surfaces on textiles, wallpaper, decoration objects, and paper goods. Okay, so this is a great example of if they're talking to someone who doesn't know what a surface designer is, such a great example of telling me and showing me really what that means. Textiles like fabrics, wallpapers, decorative objects, paper goods, etc. So that's a great example so that I'm like, oh, I get it. I get what a surface designer is. I've turned my passion into a creative business and launched a site called Patternly Design to express myself in this fascinating world. So I've turned my passion into a creative business. That's kind of cool, especially if you're talking to other entrepreneurs, and launched the site called Patternly Design. So this is another great example of giving me the title of something. So like if you have a project that maybe isn't quite as developed as this one, it's great to give it a title so that someone can first of all, if you have a title, it makes you feel like what you're talking about is more real, gives you more confidence. But also it's so great for your listener to have an actual title. And now they can find you. I can Google Patternly Design and find you. To express myself in this fascinating world. So again, I would just wonder about, I don't know, if I was talking to another artist, I might talk about expressing myself. But like if I was talking to a potential client, if I'm going to hire you to, make some fabric for me or design some wallpaper, I don't really care about you expressing yourself, if that makes any sense. So I would just be careful about what you love, what you like to express. Again, it just depends on who you're talking to. And maybe for some clients that would work. And again, same thing I told to Dave, only take whatever I'm saying that's useful. And, so good. Let us move on. Hi, I am Pat Daly. I'm a self-published author who writes in the genres of creative nonfiction and spirituality. My new book, The Deliberate Thinker, will be published soon. More below. Okay, let's go down below and see if we can find it. It's whoopsie. Just lost it. Darn. Oh goodness, where is the rest of that one? All right, I'm going to talk about the beginning and maybe somebody else can find the rest of Pat's. So a self-published author. So Pat, I want to talk to you about whether you want to say self-published author right up front. I might lead with, I'm an author who's just published a book, The Deliberate Thinker. I don't know why, but I think sometimes that some people might have a bias. I don't know. It's hard to know. It's again, it depends. I might just talk about the fact that it's self-published later on in your introduction. So, who writes in the genres of creative nonfiction and spirituality? And yeah, so I love the way you're telling me the genres that you write in right away. Of course, I automatically have questions about what topics do you cover in creative nonfiction? Do you mean memoir? And if you've written a memoir, what that is? And then when you talk about spirituality, that just, I have more questions in my mind about what spirituality means to you, because it could be defined in so many ways. And then about publishing soon, if you could give a date, it's launching September 15th. It's going to be on Amazon or wherever you're selling it, or I'm going to have a virtual book launch. Can I invite you to that? So I would just be, rather than saying soon, I would even if you don't know the date, this fall, by the end of the year. Soon is just a little bit too vague. I would try to nail a date on that. So I would love to read the rest of Pat's. Oh, thank you. Magic. It's a how-to method book about developing the creative energies of your mind to influence your world and be a happier person. Wow. Okay, so she's telling us it's a how-to. So I don't know if you need how-to method. I think if you just say how-to book about about developing the creative energies of your mind to influence your world and be a happier person. So one thing Pat is doing such a good job of here is she's telling people the results they could achieve by reading and experiencing her work. So that's another great thing you can do in an introduction, is talk about that. And in a way, that was kind of what I was doing in mine when I was talking about helping people be more authentic and warmer, is that those are the results that they could achieve by working with me. So that's a great example of that. The goal for the reader is personal growth and service to others. So that gives me some more information. And what I kind of like about that is it's talking about how it's both self-help, but also helping the world. And that would give me an idea that if I was the kind of person who was interested in both those things, personal growth and helping the world, that this is a book that would take both those things into consideration. So I think that's really great. And if there's more that will magically appear, thank you. I draw heavily on the ideas and processes of authors from the late 19th and early 20th centuries and make them applicable to today's world. That's really interesting. So, Pat, one thing I would do would be to maybe mention those authors, especially if you were talking to people, savvy people who might know those authors. So whoever those authors are, you could mention them. I have a possible idea of who you might be referring to, but you could mention them as well. So good. I'm just wondering if maybe we should move on to somebody else so we could get some other ones. And I'm happy to have Angela, you find them, or I will just pick from where I am. Oh, great. Thank you. Meg Wallace. Meg says, I intentionally create versatile images to engage imaginative dialogue. The visceral nature of my work is meant to form connections, spark imagination, and challenge perception. So, Meg, what I'm getting from this is, remember how I think I was talking to Dave about something being too cerebral and not painting, being so abstract. I don't have any images that come to mind when I read this. So what is a versatile image? I have no idea. What is imaginative dialogue? I don't really know. Visceral nature. Rather than saying visceral nature, I'd rather you give me some descriptions. Talk about colors, themes, subject matter. So that would help me more understand what the work is like. And I don't actually know if it's painting or maybe murals. I don't know. So I need some more basic information and some more down to earth information. My current body of work interweaves my passion to empower humanity with my penchant to preserve nature through the arts. Oh, so if there's something about nature, I would mention that earlier, and maybe you can give me examples. When you say nature, are we talking about squirrels? Are we talking about reptiles? Are we talking about forests? Are we talking about the sea? I mean, nature is so big, and I'm sure it's more specific. So put some of the specifics in your introduction. And again, you can just mention two or three specific things. Like, and let me just really define what I mean by specific. So rather than saying animals, say elephant, squirrel, koala bear. Rather than saying So you get the idea. Okay, good. So do we have another one to go to, or I will just pick from the side? Okay, Batia Lowenberg. My name is Peggy Batia Lowenberg. People call me Batia, like Gatya. So Batia, Gatya, Gatya. No, Batya, Batya. Okay, I'm a painter and public artist and call my abstract work urban, tropical, cosmic. So, first of all, I love the way she helps people say her name, but I'm actually a little confused if it's Batia or Batya. But she could, again, we could have a conversation about that. So that's great, and I think I think that's great, and I would want to know what she wants to be called. Does she want to be called Peggy or Batya? So that would be good at the beginning. And a painter and public artist, and I call my abstract work. So now I'm wondering, is that a third category, the abstract work, or is that is the painting abstract and is the public art abstract also? So, and when you say public art, I'd like to know, are we talking murals? Are we talking sculptures? Are we talking something else? So again, just be very, very, very specific. And I call my abstract work urban, tropical, cosmic. Interesting. Yeah. I think I would definitely want to see the work. And again, if we were in a coaching session, I would look at the work and maybe pick out things that I'm seeing in the work that you could also say. Because again, I have a generic idea of what urban means. I have a generic feeling of what tropical means. And I have a generic idea of what cosmic means. But I don't know what those mean to you. So I would want to have a little bit more there. So thank you, but yeah. Who are we going to look at next? Vicky Rosenthal, another Rosenthal. I'm Vicky Rosenthal, a visual artist creating an individual's custom design soul message of social impact on ethically responsible manufactured shoes. So this is a great example of one sentence that just needs to be broken down a little bit because it's so hard for me to keep all that in, but it's got so much great stuff in it. So, Vicky Rosenthal, a visual artist, creating. So So I had to read this a couple of times to figure out that I think what you're doing is putting a design on shoes. I think that's what you're doing. So, that thing about the custom design, I would actually break this up into a couple of different sentences because it's just so much for me to take in. And I haven't even gotten to the last sentence. So let me just get to that one and maybe that will help me a little. People can wear their souls on their shoes. Well, that is fantastic. That is such a great place to end once I understand what it is that you're doing. And it's funny. And it's, I just think that's great, a great place to end. So all I would do is just break it up a little bit. So, again, we'd have to work a little more about what that means exactly. But I love the ethically responsible. And you know what? I just realized, how about if we call them ethically manufactured shoes? So let's just take out the word responsible because that's a big word we don't need there. And then the individuals. So if I was talking to somebody, I might say, your custom design, because I'm not sure, am I designing the shoe, the design, or are you designing it? So that's all. And then there's this whole idea of the soul message. So it's all there, Vicky, but I would just, I hope how I've done this is clear for you, that it just, for someone who's just met you and doesn't know, you just have to break it down a little bit for your listener, but sounds very cool. Deborah Mitchell. I'm Deborah Mitchell, a visual artist focused on our changing environment. My long-term project, Wild Observations, is a traveling exhibition which merges scientific data from field stations. Okay, hang on. Let me before we move on to Deborah's second part, let me just talk about this beginning. So, visual artist that focuses on our changing environment. So, Deborah, I might try to think of a different word that just gives me more information than changing. So, is there something I'm guessing that changing might be talking about environmental changes, but I don't know. And our changing environment, how big are we going? Are we talking about like Earth? Are we talking about a cove where you live? I'm not sure. So I think you could get a little more details in there and give me uh, more a word that has more information than the word changing. So it's great that you gave your project a title, Wild Observations. And I'd want to ask you, when you say long-term project, exactly what you mean. So does that mean the project that you've been working on for a long time? I just would wonder about the timeline, and you may want to clarify that. And the fact that it's traveling is great, because maybe I'm somebody who wants to bring it to have it travel to where I am. So I like knowing that. And that merges scientific data from field stations. And then if we have the rest of Deborah's, then with color drenched imageries. That's very interesting. The next two venues in Venus and Key West will highlight the human impact on our natural resources and reconnecting with the natural world. So interesting. So I'd want to have, again, as you continue talking, I'd want to know about the data merging with imagery, because that sounds very cool. And when you say the next two venues, I'm assuming that the show will be traveling to Venus and Key West, and will highlight the human impact on our natural resources. And I'm guessing that you mean how people can reconnect with the natural world. So just a little editing there to clarify that a little bit. But a lot of good things in there, Deborah. So thank you for sharing. Sarah Page. Hi, I'm Sarah Page. I call myself an adventure artist. I create paintings and designs inspired by my love of the outdoors that move viewers to explore nature and themselves. So I think an adventure artist is a great, great title. It makes me smile, and I'm so curious to find out what that is. So I think that's a great descriptor. To create paintings and designs inspired by my love. Now, what I would want to know from Sarah, if we were meeting in person, or just meeting, I'd want to know what inspires you exactly. What about the outdoors? Are we talking about the air, the leaves, the what, the soil, the water, the fish, whatever? And so, and you want to inspire viewers to explore nature and themselves. Again, I just need a little more information. Are there specific natural places you want people to explore? And what is it about themselves? Is it, you call yourself an adventure artist, so maybe I'm just making this up or guessing, maybe you want to inspire people to take adventures themselves or whatever. But again, just a teeny bit more would help in those first few sentences. But a very, very, very good start. Cheryl Brown. I'm artist Cheryl Brown. I produce one-of-a-kind, hand-built, functional, and abstract clay objects. I share my love and knowledge of ceramics by creating art and teaching others. So yeah, I would question if we needed one of a kind and hand built. It's a lot to say in the beginning. And what I might do is take one of those words, maybe one of a kind, and put it later in the elevator pitch. So that at the beginning, and I would wonder about the verb produce, because produce doesn't sound like one of a kind, So create, or, hand build functional and abstract clay objects. So right after that, I might give examples of the functional. Are we talking teapots? Are we talking cups? Whatever, you might want to mention a couple. And the abstract clay objects, I'm just wondering what you can say about them, because they're just abstract. I don't know what they are, how big they are. Are they, do they go on the wall? So a teeny bit more there. And then I share my love and knowledge of ceramics by creating art and teaching others. So I'm not sure what that sentence is doing for you. I might say I'm also a teacher or something like that, but I feel like we need more there about the love and knowledge of ceramics. Um, so the beginning is so specific and then it gets a little bit general at the end, but a great start. I would just write, one thing that's great to do is to write like way too much and then really edit it down to kind of the tincture of actually what you're trying to get to. So good. I'm Joel, a novelist writing stories about extraterrestrials who want to help humanity by incarnating onto Earth as humans and get into all sorts of trouble. So let's see. He tells us he's a novelist, so that's a great place to start. He tells us what the story is about, extraterrestrials who want to help humanity by incarnating. Now, if we were talking, Joel, I would just want to hear how you say incarnating onto Earth. If I had to say that, I'd go, wow, that's hard to say. Maybe I'll say it in a slightly different way. But again, those words may just flow out of your mouth, so that might not be a problem. And then you say they get into all sorts of trouble. Well, I hope your next sentence is going to be some examples of how they get into trouble, because that's what I really want to know. So I think it's a very, very good start. And I'd also really urge you to give this book a title. Remember, one of my lessons earlier on today is give it a title. It'll help you talk about it. And I know that sometimes when we're working on the work, we're like, oh, I don't want to title it. I don't know. It can be a working title. That's totally fine. No one's going to hold you to the actual title, but giving it a title will really, really help. So I think this is a very good start and can just be expanded on a little bit and have a title added. Hi, my name is Jody Tanner, and I'm the founder and curator of Las Olas Capital Arts. Our mission is to support local and emerging artists by showcasing a solo exhibit in our office gallery space. We do all the marketing and create a reception all at our expense. If the artist sells a piece, they receive 100% of the proceeds. Jody, I am ready to sign up. The next thing I would want to know is, when can we make a meeting? That is a great intro. So specific, so clear. Really, that's terrific. Really terrific. And I hope all the artists are taking note of your name and will contact you, because I think that sounds like a great service for the absolutely right person. So that's a really, really good demonstration of just really nailing your introduction. Hi, my name is Christine Landis, and I teach drawing and watercolor painting now in online format, including live sessions. My goal is to encourage dreaming and believing in ourselves and our ability. Okay, so hang on. That's okay. To create. Yeah, Christine, great beginning. I teach drawing and watercolor. I know exactly what that is. Now and online, including live sessions. So if I am a potential student, I am like so clear. And my goal is to encourage dreaming and believing in ourselves. I don't know. Let's see where you go with that. And our ability to create. I believe creating is dreaming in action, putting it into the tangible realm. My workshops are for young and old alike, because we all need to dream and have hope. So yeah, and then when you stop dreaming, let's just see where you go with this. You stop hoping, and when you stop hoping, you start, oh gosh, waiting to die. Okay, so I think there might be too much of your opinion in here. I would leave it. If I were, remember I talked about an invitation, and again, this is totally my opinion. I would think about just inviting your potential listener to the possibilities that you offer in your classes. I would be hesitant as a student to take something that seemed like I had to believe something, or sign on for a certain something that maybe. So what attracted me as a listener more was the whole idea of live sessions that help me feel more creative and create. So again, it's so important to think about who your audience is. If you know your audience is really going to connect with this idea of dreaming, hoping, and waiting to die, you've nailed it. for somebody like me, this might be a little bit too much for me to believe in, but I was very attracted to the part about the online live sessions, the watercolor and the paintings, and also a place for me to express my creativity. So again, think about who your audience is and what's going to appeal most to them, and that will help you know what to include and what to leave out. So I know we need to watch our time. I'm going to rely on Angela to decide if we have time for another one or if we need to wrap up right now. So Angela, this is up to you. Okay, we have time for another one. I'm Marjorie Gordon, the founding director of Arts Encounters. Very clear. I consult with artists and cultural organizations on editorial projects, presentations, and programming. Okay, so hang on. Before we continue, this sounds like a great bio, but what we would need to work with Marjorie on is how to make this sound more conversational. So what she might say to somebody in person. So so that's all. I would actually have a conversation with her, which is a great thing you can do. Have a conversation and then write down what you actually say when you're talking to somebody, which is probably not to begin a sentence with drawing on 25 years of experience. There's nothing wrong with this in writing, but it just doesn't sound like we talk. So that's all you'd want to do is turn it and make it conversational. But again, I told you that our first versions are going to sound more formal. And for spoken communication, we just want to make them less formal. As a journalist, art critic, and tour guide, I would love to help you refine artist statements, professional bios, proposals, applications. Let's explore. So great. She's telling you what kinds of things she can work on. And what I might do at the end of this is a great an example of, and I could have said this about everyone's, but maybe there's a question you can ask your audience member at the end. Could be like, let's say you're a visual artist. What kind of art do you have on your walls? If you're a writer, you could say, have you ever read any sci-fi? Oh, really? What do you read? Or whatever genre that you're writing in, to get more information about your listener. So I would probably encourage Marjorie to end with a question. Oh, are you an artist? What kind of art do you do? Have you ever written an artist statement? Was it easy or hard, et cetera, et cetera. So a call to action at the end, and this might be a great place to end today, can also be a question for your audience member. Because like I said, the real purpose of these introductions is to start a conversation and build a relationship. And it may take years of a relationship building until it's time to actually go into business with a person. I've been in touch with people for years before we decide to work together. So your introduction is just the first little step. And, the last thing I want to say, just as we're ending today, your introduction is a living thing. It's going to change as you grow, as you mature, as you change, as your work changes, as your company changes, as your business changes. And it's just going to keep getting better and better and better and better. So it's always in the process of refinement, and it's really never, never going to be done. So thank you so much for spending this time with me on this early Saturday morning. It's been such a pleasure to be here. Please reach out to me at gigirosenberg.com. I have lots of stuff on my website, and that's there for you to download. And I can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you, Gigi. I think we could go on for another hour. You have such great critiques, and you made so many wonderful points. And I know everyone got a lot out of this session. We want people to continue following you at your website at gigirosenberg.com, and they can connect and find other tips from you there.
Absolutely. I can't wait to hear from you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thank you for sticking it out to the end with us. And this was the last session of the Business Skills for the Modern Creator. But wait, there's more, because the fun is not over just yet, because the Broward Cultural Division will continue to offer virtual workshops and resources to artists just like all of you and art organizations. So coming up Next week, mark your calendars now. Thursday, August 27th from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, there is going to be a visual storytelling workshop called How to Tell an Effective Story. So the Broward Cultural Division has invited the Visual Storytelling Institute to assist artists and art organizations to engage virtual audiences and how to virtually represent yourself and your brand. So the 2-hour session will provide you with strategies and tools that will be seen through relevant and compelling content marketing. So while you're on YouTube or while you're on Facebook, make sure to follow the Broward Cultural Division. And if you're still there, check out Art Hive Magazine too. We'd love for you to follow what we're doing. And thank you so much for joining us with these sessions. I hope they have been as inspirational and amazing. I know I have learned a lot. I've taken a lot of notes. I hope you all have. But if you want to go back and replay them, they're right there on YouTube or Facebook. Have a creative day. Bye-bye.